And away we go. Where are we going? We're going back to 1912, back to Villisca, Iowa, back to one of the most horrific murders that is still talked about today. Now, through this, I guess you want to say, series of episodes that we have done on this crime, this horrific crime, we have found out a lot of things along the way that we've heard over these decades that weren't exactly fact, that had been twisted and turned and, added to, like a big game of telephone along the way. And I am so grateful that I got to speak to this gentleman, not only on the phone, but here with you. And I am just so thrilled. And I think this is the perfect way to not close the book on the crime, but open the book. The book is Villisca, the Fiend Incarnate. And it is, I actually have a picture here. Let me put it up. You saw one, but I'm going to show you another one. Open the book, get the book, read it, learn about it. Because whether you're interested in just history, the human condition and how people react to certain events, how a small town would react, a town of barely, I think, 2,000 or just over 2,000 at the time, how it affected them, how it affected everybody around them and the people that survived these things, and how did they react and what did they go through, how did they change. We also went into the Lizzie Borden case, you and I before, similar things, how the town reacted, how they acted one way at one time and then all of a sudden switched and it ebbed and hemmed and hawed and moaned and everything. So it's very interesting. But whether you're interested in the true crime or the history, or the characteristics of people and how they react, you also have to be interested in it if you're a paranormal investigator, or if you are interested in that kind of not even just seeking evidence and research, but you got to go in there with the facts. Because here's the thing: who are you talking to, right? Who are you getting reaction from? What are you feeling? What's there right now? So we're going to talk more about that aspect of it tomorrow night with Mr. Steve Stockton. And tonight we are going to finish this wonderful series with this gentleman. I hope that he is welcome here anytime. He can have as many nights as he wants. All he's got to do is say, Cisco, put me on, and here we'll do it again, because we could have him on so many times and we would just get more aspects of the spider webbing and the way this reached out in so many directions. And tonight we're going to have a wonderful Q&A. We have, again, my wonderful friend, my buddy, this old rattlesnake here. Let me beat the grass and see if he's ready. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready, baby. You ready? But here's the book. You can get it at villiscabook.com. Let me take that down. And mods, if you throw that up there, it's villiscamovie.com and it's villiscabook.com. You can get the hard copy. You can get the ebook. Please get it there, and or go see Dr. Epperly on one of his wonderful seminars. We go and talks to the library. If you're near Iowa, absolutely go see him live, give him support, and just show him how much we appreciate his research and his integrity and everything else. So let's get Steve in here. Come on in here, you old rattlesnake. Hi, honey.
Hey, what's going
How
on?
you doing?
How's everybody doing? Doing good.
You're a
Doing
little
nice.
low, baby.
Hey, sweetheart. Let's see.
Turn it up
Mikey,
to 11.
Mikey was in that space here.
Hey, Midnight.
Uh,
Hello, this wonderful chat and all you wonderful
how's that?
people.
Is that better? Is that better? What's going on here?
That sound good. That sound
Is
good.
that better? Okay.
Yeah,
Can
that's
everybody hear
perfect.
me okay?
5-5 for Steve.
Put
5-5
an
for Steve.
algebraic equation in the chat if you can hear me.
All right.
Uh,
I'm going to say hi real quick.
there she
Midnight
is. I love
Society.
you.
Hello, love. I love you too. Spinal
Cisco,
Tap. Yes, Spinal Tap. I
Cisco's
could
going
do
to be in our
Spinal Tap
wedding.
all night.
Cisco is going to
Yep.
be in our wedding.
I am indeed. It sounds like I'm going to be all over that wedding. Okay, so Bobcat, welcome in. Vixen Doe, Jack, hello, Salvador. Hello. Julie, welcome in. Welcome. Vixen Doe, I saw you. And Edna, D-Rock, hello. Jesse, hello, my love. How are you, darling? Slow Mo, hey baby, Uncommon Belief. Renice, hi baby. Lynn Monet, she brought popcorn for everybody, Steve. So they're passing that out right now with the bacon.
Who
And
passed out what?
they're passing out bacon or
They're passing out.
popcorn and bacon, I think.
They're passing out.
But bacon around here means love. Use your bacon properly tonight, folks.
Redirected over,
welcome
so
in.
got people over that.
Welcome.
Here. Thank you for coming over.
Thank you so much. If I missed you,
the entire world.
I love you back, baby. So if I missed you, Sasha Bell, hi, darling. Welcome. So tonight, Steve, I've done so much to talk in here. Hey, Bobby. Hey, Bobcat. Welcome. And if I miss you, Deanna, let me,
when were you talking? Who would dare make such an accusation?
Woo. Yeah, I could talk the paint off a wall.
Ask Soraya, ask Kath. He lost control of his radio station when he was interviewing us.
This is our wonderful.
For over an hour before he did.
I know, longer than that. So tonight, what we're going to do, and we're going to try not to keep this gentleman. Last time we kept him up, but he almost turned into a pumpkin. So this is our Q&A night, Steve, and also we're going to do a few little things on F.F. Jones and a little bit on another character that I think really shines kind of darkly in this whole thing. And I think Dr. Epperly knows exactly what I mean. So would you like to introduce him this time, Steve? This is you're being introduced to this whole thing. You'd heard about it.
I'll bring him on then. Dr. Ed Epperly, come on down.
Come on down. Hello, hon.
Dr. Epperly, how you doing, sir? Good to see you once again.
Yeah, I'm just fine. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. Wonderful to have you. Again, the book is villiscabook.com. The mods will throw it up here. We do have one piece. Welcome, Dr. Epperly. It's wonderful to see you. I'm going to see if I can share my screen real quick because this wonderful person here, let me see if I can do it. Yes, I can. I think I might be able to do it. This person right here has spent all the from minute one taking down all your questions, put them wonderfully together in a wonderful doc and send it to there you go. And here is some of her wonderful stuff. I'm going to get over here and pull this up so you see. Her name is Susan Woodcarver. She is a gatekeeper here. She is one of our lovely chat members. Look at this beautiful art she does here. So I wanted to reach out and give her, look at that, isn't that gorgeous? And I wanted to give her a nod and a hug and let you know of this wonderful artist. We're always celebrating art, whether you're an author, a researcher, you're a composer, you play an instrument, you just make beautiful art and bring beauty into people's lives. We celebrate you here and whatever that may be. So there she is. That's her. And it is Susan Woodcarver right now .com or SusanAlexanderCarves.com. That's what I have here now. So I wanted to give her a nod because she did take down those wonderful questions for us. And that wasn't easy to do. Put them all in little categories and everything. It's absolutely wonderful. So we're thrilled to have you, Dr. Epperly, back. And how would you like to start tonight? Would you like to touch on F.F. Jones, or you want to go just to the questions? You want to talk a little bit about Wilkerson? Where do you want to take this?
It really doesn't matter to me. If you have a preference, let's just do it.
All right. I would like to touch a little bit on one of the, and just whatever you feel comfortable doing. One of the most dastardly, other than the killer themselves and some of the psychos that were running around that day, this person here has got to be one of the most devious, self-righteous, do anything to get the get the story, whatever. And that's Wilkerson. Do you want to talk a little bit about the significance while I look for his picture?
Sure.
I know. Yep, I got it. Okay, it's on 20. Go right ahead. The floor is yours, love.
Okay. Wilkerson came to Villisca on, I think it was the 30th of April, 1914, 2 years after the murder. And if he hadn't entered the scene, there wouldn't have been a case against F.F. Jones. Now, a lot of people locally suspected F.F. Jones, who I've mentioned before. He was a banker and state senator, wealthy man. And his daughter-in-law was having at least contact, if not a full-blown affair, with the murdered man, Joe Moore. But they didn't know what to do with that. They had that suspicion, and they were desperate to convict someone, and they felt he was the best prospect they had. And so they talked about it, they meaning the citizens of Villisca, Montgomery County. And Wilkerson appeared on the scene as a Texas land agent. He opened an office in downtown Villisca and claimed that he was offering land for sale down in the valley. He was from the Star Land Company in Far, Texas, and that's PH Texas. I mean, it's PH, but it's pronounced as an F, Far, Texas. And no one had any reason to doubt that. And he was there for about a month when he would talk to people and encourage them to come with him on a train, a private train he was going to schedule, and they would look at this land to buy. He said he wanted to get the best farmers in the world to the best land in the world. Now, about a month after he came, one night, he came to Ross Moore's drugstore. That's a brother of the murdered man. Knocked on the screen door. Ross came out and he introduced himself. He used his own name. He had always been James N. Wilkerson, James Newton Wilkerson. And but he said, "I'm not a land agent. I'm an operative for the Burns Detective Agency. Been hired by the state of Iowa, and I've been here working incognito, talking about the murder. And now I've got enough evidence to prove that F.F. Jones hired the killer that did the Villisca axe murder." That was in early summer 1914. From then on until he left town in 1918, he didn't stay in town continuously. He was continuing to work for Burns, and they had several cases going at once, and he would move around, but he spent most of his time in Villisca. As you can see, he was a handsome enough guy. He was very popular, talkative, friendly, outgoing, but very aggressive. And he quickly decided, from talking to the local citizens, he pulled together the rumors. He canonized the rumors and said, these are just rumors. These are facts. These are true. Here's a picture of him. This man is John Montgomery, who is the father of Sarah Moore, the murdered woman. And he made a point of becoming friends with all of the victims' close relatives. He felt that if he could get them on their side, that would help him in his campaign. And he was hired by the state of Iowa. They were paying him money, or paying the Burns Agency money. And he sent reports. Many of his early reports showed that he really didn't know much about what had gone on, but he thought the killer had done the killing in the nude wearing a pair of gloves. And the argument for that was that way he would get no blood on his clothes, and he had been in prison and knew about fingerprints. No one else thought that, and he didn't have any evidence for that, but he advocated that. The investigations went on quietly. The public soon knew, the local citizens knew, but nothing was said publicly for the first year or so. There were articles in the local paper, Villisca Review, saying that there's been all kinds of rumors implicating a prominent citizen, and these are absurd, and you should pay them no mind. But behind the scenes, everyone was talking about it. And then one of his problems was, who is the killer? I've got to have a killer if I'm going to have somebody convicted. He identified a guy, Whipple, Harry Whipple. Harry was a young man in his late 20s, a big man. He was tall, 6 foot or more, and heavy built. He was the local champion in Iowa and Midwest. In those days, they had wrestling, professional wrestling and amateur wrestling, and every town had its champion. And people would go on a tour and go from town to town and have wrestling matches, and people pay a fee ticket to get in and things like that. And Harry Whipple represented a little town called Carbon, Iowa. It's pretty obvious that it was a coal mining town, and was about 20 miles north and east of Villisca. Nobody knew him in Villisca. He was on the bottom rail of the economic ladder. He was not wealthy at all. He was married and had a stepdaughter who was quite young. And he, according to Wilkerson, he was part of a huge gang that stretched out across the state and into other states, and they had a cipher code so they could communicate. And they weren't hesitant to kill a stoolie if somebody talked about them, and were involved in all kinds of things like that. And then in the summer of 1914, it was the summer of 1914, a real plum fell in Wilkerson's lap. In Blue Island, Illinois, there was an axe murder of a family named Mishlik. It happened July 5. And he rushed there because he immediately saw that it might be an opening. Maybe he could relate this to the Villisca murder. No one else did that, but Wilkerson insisted they were just alike. A man and his wife, an elderly man and his wife, their daughter, and their daughter's daughter, their granddaughter, were all killed by an axe, their own axe, on that night. And the father of the girl, the daughter, and the husband of their daughter was a man named Mansfield, Bill Mansfield, William Mansfield. And the police initially suspected him. He was interviewed and but released because he proved to the police's satisfaction, at least, that he was in Milwaukee when the murder in Chicago occurred. They also suspected a fellow who was from Eastern Europe, and he had lived with the Mishliks for a while as a roomer, board and room with them, and he was seen there that night.
You're fine.
I'm okay.
You're flashing a little, but that's fine. It's like a disco. It's fine. You're good.
Okay. Well, right
You're
now,
not losing any connection whatsoever. It's just a little flash sometimes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. My screen went out.
Uh-oh.
But I don't know what that means exactly. I'm trying to figure that out.
Take your time.
I don't think it matters much how much time I take. Said there was no signal for that. But you're getting a signal, right?
I am. Are you hearing him fine, Steve?
I hear you fine.
Okay.
Can you see me?
I see you. You look beautiful.
Well, that's nice.
What do you think that is, Steve? Steve's my tech person. He says he's getting no signal, it says on his laptop, but we see him. I can't figure that out. Where's my tech people in the chat? What button should he mash?
The screen went dark.
Your screen went dark? And it's not the battery, it's not because it's still putting out.
He's still streaming because we can still see him, but he can't see his screen.
He can't see us.
Well, I can go with a blank screen. That doesn't
You
bother
can go
me.
with a blank screen, or you can go out and just follow the same. Usually, if you go out and you follow the same link back in, like
Okay,
you would just from the beginning, try that.
I'll
And if
try it.
anything happens, you just call me and we'll get you from
There,
there.
I'm back now. I'm back now.
He's
I
back.
think it might. Yeah, I think it might have been in the mouse when I
Okay.
moved the mouse that came back.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds like they're
We're
just
ready.
going to sleep. Yeah.
Okay, there
Well,
we go.
we'll go for a while at least.
It's gonna be one of those nights, Ed.
You're dealing with an electronic illiterate.
Oh, and
So,
I'm just as bad as you are. So we're gonna have to. We have people in
well,
the chat that know. No,
well,
we're back now, Aunt Edna. We're good.
okay. Well, Wilkerson immediately pounced on that and claimed that Mansfield was actually the murderer. The other one who had been arrested, his name was Kashmir. That's a first name.
I'll be right back.
They couldn't find him. And then he showed up the next year, 1915, in Buffalo, New York, and he went into the police station and confessed. He said he knew that they had money in a mattress upstairs, and so he said, I killed them to get the money. And just as I killed the child, the small child, I'd killed everyone else, and I was going to get the money, a dog barked. And I thought that I would be caught, so I fled and got no money at all. But that dog has stayed with me all year. Wherever I go, that dog is there, and I can hear it barking.
How crazy.
And so he finally confessed to murder. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to a mental hospital. He was ruled mentally insane. Wilkerson now felt that he had a better suspect than Whipple. He kept Whipple and Whipple's brother-in-law, a young man who had just gotten married. He kept him, the two of them, as helpers. He argued that they were in the house. That was partly because Wilkerson would pick up ideas locally and incorporate them into his description. And many local people had gotten the idea that one person couldn't do it. They had to have more. And so Wilkerson had been supporting that idea and agreeing to that. And they also felt that they had hid in the closets. Wilkerson got that idea and publicized it. Then the year of 1915 was kind of quiet. He sent a report to the state, sent several reports, but one, he found a woman in Marshalltown, Iowa, who claimed to have been in Villisca in the late fall, maybe it was August, September of 1911. Her husband was working on the bricking of the main street in Villisca, and they were camping outside of town. And she apparently had some kind of a story about hearing something during that camping trip. And so he went to Marshalltown, and this was it's incredible story.
Is this Vina? Is this Vina?
Yes, this is
Okay.
Vina. Her name was Vina Tompkins. Her husband's name was Elmo, and Vina was supposedly Elmo was in this same gang with Harry Whipple, and Vina knew that they would kill her in a minute if the story got out. So he talked to her, and she wouldn't cooperate. This is Wilkerson talking. She wouldn't cooperate, and so he tried to devise a system to get her to cooperate. And so to do that, he ran across a fortune teller who was selling cosmetics in Marshalltown. She was from New York City and had a group of workers, and they would go out and door to door and try to sell cosmetics. And so he talked with her, and yes, she could run the cards, and she knew how to throw herself into a trance and so on. So he gave her a body of information about Vina.
Mm.
And then she went to Vina's house, knocked on the door, and gives the pitch about the cosmetics, but then notices, well, you seem to me that you have a great emotional barrier. You're carrying a load. You have fear and anxiety. And
Oh my.
I got inside and told her fortune and convinced her that she could see the past and future because Wilkerson had filled her full of information, which she would not have known, but now she did. But Vina didn't know that. And one of the things then that the fortune teller left her with was that you're going to meet somebody soon who can solve these problems for you.
Oh
And
my.
then Wilkerson waited a couple of days and then contrived to meet her out on the street, and she immediately told him the story, and he allowed, as it seemed like it was absolutely true, and he would help her if she would tell him what she knew about this. And so she was afraid to do that at home, but they arranged to meet in the Marshalltown Cemetery. And they, in the summer of 14, they met out in the cemetery, leaning up against a tombstone, I suppose. And she told him that she had, Wilkerson said, she had been camping and gone to pick up some wood at an old abandoned slaughterhouse out southeast of Villisca, which is true. There is was such a building. And there was a growth of willows, and she hid behind those willows because there were three men talking, and they were talking about money and how they could get it, and people and authorities wouldn't know about it. And there was a job to be done. This is almost a year before the murder, but it was an example of this is how the person to do the murder was hired. And F.F. Jones was supposedly one of those three. He has a big full beard,
Right.
much like the one I'm looking at, and and that was not public. That came out. That's going to come out a year later in 15. Well, it's going to come out in 16. Excuse me. But other than that, the other thing that was important about 1915, there wasn't a lot of public announcements and things like that. The case seemed to be dragging along and not getting anywhere. He took a job. The Burns Agency sent him to New Ulysses, Kansas in the summer of 1915. There had been a murder where a country school teacher, Nellie Byers, young woman, she had been, she was out on the prairie. It's a godforsaken place. I don't want to blast Western Kansas, but if you draw a big circle around Western Kansas, Eastern Colorado, Oklahoma Panhandle, Texas Panhandle, it's dry, and it's a struggle to get along there, I think. And anyway, she was at a country school in the fall of 1915, teaching school. And on a Friday afternoon, she left. She had to walk 3 miles to a house where she was boarding. And she never got home that night. And they thought that perhaps she had gone to her sister's, which would have been another, and just hadn't told them. But when she didn't show up the next morning at all, that was a Saturday, so there wasn't school. They went out and notified people, and the posse gathered, and they started searching, and they found her. She had been attacked, raped, and murdered, and was lying in some bushes on the way home. She had just crossed the Cimarron River and been killed. That, of course, great hoopla. People gathered. And one man that got there was Archibald Sweet, Archie Sweet. He was a big, rough fellow who had been moved in a few months before and lived in that town. New Ulysses, Kansas was the town where this was taking place. And he was immediately a suspect because he was living in a soddy hut about less than a mile from where the murder occurred. And she had complained the week before on the way home. She took off her socks and
stockings and shoes. Did you lose me again?
I did for a moment, but I'm back.
You're still here.
Okay. If it goes blank and I can't get it, I'll just keep talking.
Just go out or come back in or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I think
you're
it's
fine.
place going to sleep, and it should be just a mouse touch or a key touch, and it'll come back on.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, Steve.
But
go ahead, love.
She had complained to the people she was living with that she saw Archie standing on a hill about a quarter mile away while she crossed the river, and that bothered her. And so they were getting they were going to bring bloodhounds, and Archie started to leave, and some of the men said, "You stay." And when he heard they were going to bring bloodhounds, he went to the county sheriff and asked for protective custody. And so he was whisked away, and the bloodhounds went right to his shanty. And so the investigation started. They developed some physical evidence, macabre, but physical nonetheless. The killer, in his excitement, had bitten her breast. And deeply enough that they were, yes, they got a dental impression, which they matched to Archie. So he was pretty well dead to rights when Wilkerson came to town. And Wilkerson immediately started talking to the well-to-do in town and raised a reward. They already had a fellow that they were pretty convinced did it in jail. And so Wilkerson immediately announced that no, it wasn't Archie. It was a man named Henson, who lived with Archie. That's who did. Well, Henson had testimonial proof that he was 10 miles away working on a farm the day when the murder would have occurred. But Wilkerson was always good at coming up with arguments and so on. And he then tried to get Henson to confess. He arrested him as a private detective and threw him in jail. He then bribed the other prisoners to kangaroo him and he gave him a rubber hose to beat him with during the night, and then going to question him the next day. He denied all of it and so on. And he then started working with Archie, trying to persuade him, here's what you should say. And he coached him and things like that. Well, the local authorities were suspect now. And so he wanted to meet Archie. And so they put him in this room with a pot-bellied stove that the chimney ran up into the room above. And they put a court reporter at that, and they took the chimney apart up above so that they left the door a crack open a bit, and it became a funnel so that the Wilkerson and Archie could be overheard. And he spent about an hour explaining how Archie was to handle these questions he was going to get tomorrow and to defend himself. And then the next day, the same court reporter took it down, and he said it was just amazing that Archie repeated it word for word, and he even had Wilkerson's accent. He had taken everything. And they confronted Wilkerson with this evidence, and he blew up and claimed that they weren't trying to solve the case and all of that. And they fired him on the spot. But I think that's indicative. The reason I give you that story is because that was during his lead-in to attacking Jones, and his modus operandi was the same each time, and that was get someone that we can convict. And it mattered not a bit to him that if they were convicted, they would be probably executed. Although
Right.
Archie wasn't. Archie was sent to prison for life, and so on. But he didn't care. It wasn't just ruining reputations; it was taking lives. And
Right.
so that was a pretty telling thing. Well, he also
He's
got
diabolical. He's diabolical. There was nothing he wouldn't do to get a conviction, because I believe he had political aspirations and things like that, and
we'll prove
and
that.
getting pushed. Yeah, can we?
Yeah.
That's right, we can.
Yeah.
Can't we?
He
Okay.
when it's all over, he did.
Yeah.
He had a very colorful character. He had
Mm.
30 years of life after all this took place,
Yeah.
and he did a lot of interesting things. But anyway, he in 1916, so a full year, a year and a half after he had Vina Tompkins talking to him, there was an election, a primary election. And the primary election was very important in Iowa because the Republicans dominated the state, still do, but more so probably than they even do now. But if you won the Republican primary, there was a very strong chance you would be elected. So it was the real race.
Mm-hmm.
An Iowa senator, I think Senator Dolliver, I believe in 1908, made this statement. A woman reporter asked him, do you think Iowa will go Democratic next year? And he looked at her and said, Madam, hell will go Methodist before Iowa goes Democratic. I always thought that was a great quote.
That's a great line. That's a good line. Yeah.
But anyway,
These characters.
F.F. Jones was running against Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe had been the county attorney in Montgomery County and had led the investigation. And during that campaign, just on the Sunday before the Tuesday election, about 30 people in Red Oak and Villisca got a mailing which consisted of a mugshot taken from Leavenworth Penitentiary of William Mansfield, the fellow who was his wife and daughter and in-laws were killed by an axe murderer. And so and it included a statement, something to the effect, I'll paraphrase it, do you want to elect as your state senator, the man who hired this man to do the Villisca murder or to kill the people at Villisca, something like that. Well, it was everyone knew Wilkerson sent it. It was postmarked Kansas City, where Wilkerson was centered. And Jones lost the election by a great margin, and so that was the end of his political career. A little while, a week or two later, there was a article came out in the Kansas City Post, written by Jack Boyle. Jack Boyle is the guy who created the Boston Blackie character. Mm-hmm. And he was working now as a reporter on the Kansas City Post. And in that article told the Vina Tompkins story about meeting in the cemetery and hearing them plot to hire somebody for the murder and things like that. Mm. Then that, of course, was a big explosion. And then shortly thereafter, Wilkerson arrested Mansfield in Kansas City, Kansas, working in a packing house, which is what he did. He actually was a labor organizer, but he did it by going inside working with our workers. And then when he got caught, he would get booted out of the job, but he would pick up another packing plant and so on. So he was arrested for the murder, and he had to be extradited. There was an extradition hearing. And then Kansas sent him to Iowa. He came to Red Oak, held in the Red Oak jail, and they had a special grand jury, basically to assess his guilt. He brought a lawyer with him. Let's see, not trying to remember the lawyer's name. Can't get it right now. It'll pop back maybe. But the lawyer was.
It wasn't this. No, that's the judge. Rockefeller was the judge, right?
Yeah, the lawyer's not there. I
Okay.
made some notes. Let me see here.
It's okay. There's the lawyer. There's another Wilkerson too, guys.
Yeah.
With
That doesn't matter. Read the book. You'll find it there.
there you go.
It might come back to me as we talk.
That's
Anyway,
all right.
the lawyer did two things. One, he came and defended Mansfield, and two, he sued the Burns Detective Agency because when Mansfield had been arrested, he was very badly treated. He had been beaten and had some. He was passing blood through the kidneys for a while. But the night he was arrested, they put him in a car. They had three people taking him to the jail. Wilkerson was one of them. And they stopped on the bridge that goes across the Kansas River into another part of Kansas. And Wilkerson stopped the car and said, "Let's just throw this son of a bitch off the bridge. Let's save the state the trouble of trying him." And so they were threatened him that way. He was a tough guy. He refused to knuckle under to that, and so they held him. And then the extradition I had mentioned, and finally his lawyer defending him. They interviewed a lot of people, including Vina Tompkins, but all of that's secret for the grand jury. And he was released, no true bill. They didn't find that he was involved. And the reason they didn't was that the lawyer came in with documents from where he had been working on the night of the murder. And that was Montgomery, Illinois, which is 400 or 500 miles away. And not only did he have documents, but he had sworn affidavits from the payroll clerk who had paid him, the payroll officer who had certified it, the manager of the company, a man named Greer. So he had all kinds of evidence that he was not in Villisca when the murder occurred. And so he wasn't held. Wilkerson went off like a skyrocket, and he had a series of meetings. He had 4 meetings. The first one was out at Friar's Pasture, south of town. He talked for 4 hours, and he stood up in front of the crowd and patted his breast pocket and said, "I've got the documents in here that'll show that F.F. Jones put up the dirty money that hired Blackie Mansfield to kill the people." And then he had another
by car headlights, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Like they
well,
had
not that one, but the next one was.
Okay.
The next one, he went to Montgomery's farm, and that was at night, and he formed a circle of cars so that he stood up in the back of a car and gave the presentation.
And that would have such an impact. That's why I wanted you to say that. Such an impact.
Yeah.
You've got these people are scared to death. Here's this man standing up there from the Burns Detective Agency. He's, been seen around town talking and hobnobbing with all the big wigs. Yep. And now he's standing up there on a farm saying, "Do you want this guy elected? And this is what he's done. And F.F. Jones done this. And look at this horrible man." It's just amazing how much he pushed this. Yep. He really was dug in like a tick.
Well, then F.F. Jones decided he couldn't take any more, and so he sued him for slander. And they had a trial in the fall of 1916. Lasted about a month. One of these trials of a century. Huge crowd. The people filled the courtroom, and then they started to. They went up behind in here and filled this area. Some people stood up. These are windows, and they've got a shelf, a window. They're not an inserted window, but 6-8 inches. And some people who are more agile than I am hopped up there and
Sat on it.
stood where they could see.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, this is not that trial, but it's the same room. All that's the same. And finally, they filled the area behind the judge. And they had what they called
It's crazy,
camper. Right? They had what they called campers, were people who got there very early and sat in the front rows, and they brought lunches with them so they could stay all day and not lose their seat. And the crowd spilled out into the hallway, things like that.
Imagine.
Well, he had Wilkerson hired a good lawyer, Ed Mitchell, out of Council Bluffs. And Mitchell kind of played the part of the old country lawyer, and he was opposed by a couple of local lawyers from Red Oak, and but he was good. And the local lawyers presented the case, which was very quickly done. They brought some people who had been at these meetings. Did he say this? Yes, he stood up and said that. Did he say that he killed him? Did he hired him? Yes. And Mansfield, yes, he said all that. And he said, well, a case rests. It's slanderous. And they stopped. Mitchell got up and said, no, we don't have any question with that. We don't argue that. We agree. He said that. Mm-hmm. But what we're going to do, we're going to present the case that will prove that F.F. Jones did hire the murderer and Mansfield did the murder. And therefore, it's the truth. And you can't slander with the truth.
With the truth, you're right.
And so they just turned the trial on his head. It became a trial of
F.F. Jones.
Not Wilkerson for slander, but F.F. Jones for murder. And so Wilkerson brought in all of his evidence, and they testified. We don't have time to look in that deeply, but he had 4 key witnesses. And they all claim to have overheard something. We've already met Vina, who claimed to have heard them talking about doing it. The second one was Alice Willard. Alice Willard, I used to say when I was in Villisca talking about it, I said, in this, you're going to, well, let me go ahead and then I'll get back to that. Alice Willard's reputation was not good. She was divorced, living with her father a block south of the murder house. And on Saturday morning, she testified that she was up to the neighbors getting some flowers, and 2 strangers walked by, and she looked at them and watched them. And then an hour later, she was on her porch, and they walked by again. And she thought not too much about that. It was a Saturday night. On Saturday night, she went out with a guy who had been, he was a salesman, supposedly, who she knew. Let me see if I can find his name. I didn't have much luck on the first one.
It's all right. There's a lot of names in here.
Well, I tell you, I'm getting old, and I don't handle my names as well as I did at one time.
I couldn't remember my own name today, so don't feel bad.
Well, I don't feel bad about it because I can't do anything about it. If I could do something about it, I'd probably feel terrible.
I just think it's amazing how Wilkerson, Steve, he orchestrated so much. And, I got to say, as much as I despise that character, he was definitely dug in as a tick. He wasn't giving up, and he played every foul stick he could throw at the fire, if you know what I mean. He was like that. I mean, just to picture him standing on porches and at farms and saying, do you want to hire, elect this man again as your senator who hired this man, and showed the pictures of how scary this was to these people, Sure. And this hound was cut in half, folks. Absolutely sliced in half, Go ahead, Steve.
Ed McCrae was his name, by the way.
There you go.
finally came back to me.
I couldn't remember it either. I'm sorry.
Alice claimed
job.
Claimed that night she and he had been driving, and the car broke down just a half a block away, and they came walking down towards the Moore house. And the very back of the Moore lot was a plum thicket. And just then she saw three men coming up the road, and she recognized them as two of them as the two that she had seen in the morning. And so they hid, Alice and Ed hid in the plum thicket. Mm-hmm. And as always happens in Wilkerson's tales, it just happened that the three turned, climbed a fence, and went to the right in front of them, not 20 feet away. And here came two people, which was F.F. Jones and Bert McCall, the pool hall operator who had the piece of skull down in his hall, things like that. And they met, the five men met right in front of them and told a most lurid tale that she couldn't hear it all, but she heard, "Get Joe first and the rest will be easy." And then they broke up, and they went downtown. The three went downtown, and the other two went to the west. Her testimony was a damning testimony. I mean, if that were true. Mm-hmm. But well, let's take it kind of sequence. The third one they had, it was a guy named Landers. Ed Landers was a real estate salesman from Shenandoah, town south and west of Villisca. And he was staying with his mother, who is in the same block, in the block to the east, but on the same road. And so they were close to the murder. And he was very deeply involved in the murder as a kind of a volunteer investigator. He rode with some police and things like that. And he came in as a complete surprise. He said that the Saturday night, or excuse me, the murder night, Sunday, he had been working at his sister's cafe downtown. And they were walking down the street, the sidewalk that led to the Moore house. And when they were about half a block away, they noticed someone was walking in front of them. And they followed that person all the way. They were gaining on them. And when they got right in front of the Moore house, he turned and walked in to the Moore house. And it was about 8:30 at night. Everyone in the house had gone to church. And when he turned and he could see a side view of him, he realized it was Albert Jones. And Wilkerson's case had him going in the house because he knew the house. He lived in the same block and had visited there, and that he was placing the killers in the proper place. That's why he was going in the house during church when everyone was gone. He said when they turned, they were only 8 feet apart, less than 3 steps. And he hadn't said anything about that until the trial. And it was interesting when he was asked, he said, "Was it Albert Jones? Do you testify it was Albert Jones? Or how do you testify about that?" And he didn't answer. He didn't answer for over 5 minutes. Wow. And they were trying to persuade him, "You've got to answer this." And he finally did by saying it was Albert Jones.
That's a long time sitting on a stand to not answer a question.
Both lawyers were pleading with him to do that.
That's incredible.
The last one was a man named Noel, and he claimed he lived behind the Moore or the Jones business uptown. And in the summer of 16, before the election, he claimed to have heard voices out in a machine shed. And he went out there, and for an hour he stood there and listened through a crack in the wall of the machine shed. It was a board and batten shed, and he could see, and it was F.F. and Albert and Bert McCall and someone else he didn't know. And they were talking about they had to get rid of Wilkerson, and Wilkerson they'd lose the election if they didn't, and it was a kind of a repeat of the case against Jones. Well, went to trial. The slander suit. They ruled in favor of the detective.
Yep.
Now, the man on the street thought that meant then that F.F. Jones was guilty. It wasn't a trial for murder. He had to pay the cost of. Jones had to pay the cost of the trial, but he was not guilty of murder in any way. So for them, they have to have a new trial. And Oscar Winston, who was a young district attorney, had won the position by saying, I'm going to call a new grand jury and we're going to solve this case. And so he hired Wilkerson to be his investigator. And Wilkerson thought that here is a junior county attorney, no experience. I can dominate him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was busy collecting information, getting ready for the trial. He had prepared a document which he called the Wilkerson dope sheet, that about 160 pages, which listed all of the people who were going to testify, and it gave them a summary of what they were going to say and what they had experienced, what they had told him. And he gave that, he was going to use that to call people. But before that happened, the Iowa Attorney General, Horace Abner, Horace wanted to be governor of Iowa. All attorney generals want to be governors.
Yeah.
But he had just been elected, and he decided that if I could solve this case, if I prosecute this case, that'll be a real feather in my hat. On the other hand, if I don't, it's going to be a problem. But he came down and took over the case, which he was legally allowed to do. I mean, he had a right to do that. Mm-hmm. And he brought in Fred Favell, who was a hotshot lawyer from Northwest Iowa, Storm Lake, I think. And he came as he would run the grand jury. They took over the grand jury. All of a sudden, Wilkerson had been knocked off his pedestal because he thought he was going to control the grand jury, and now he didn't. There are all kinds of shenanigans going on during this. Wilkerson, after the grand jury just got started the second day or so, he was caught in the county attorney's files, he pulled out a file and took it with him and got caught in the process. Then that showed up a week later, been put back in by Wilkerson, who had a key to the county attorney's office. And there was a robbery of the Jones hardware store that Wilkerson plotted. He went to Atlantic, 30 miles north, and talked to the sheriff and he said, I've got a job I want somebody to do. And I heard that you've got a guy named Brick Boiler, who's a young fella, and he might be a good one. And the guy said, well, he's been in fights and troubles. You can't hire him. He said, oh, you can't have a Sunday school boy to do a criminal investigation. He said he might be all right. And Brick brought along two helpers, Squint Walker and Red Nave. Red was only, 16 years old. And Wilkerson hired them, gave them a gun, and they were to go into the store at night and try to get a set of files that F.F. Jones had gathered. Jones had hired a private detective to put together a dossier about Wilkerson. At the same time, there was a guy who became known as Mr. M. His name was Moore, no relation to the
No
murder.
relation.
No, he was a newspaper reporter. Had worked for the Sioux City papers. I think he worked at Des Moines paper some. And he was close to Wilkerson because he was a newspaper reporter. Wilkerson cultivated them. And so he had kind of an inside look. And Jones paid him money to feed him information of what Wilkerson was planning and doing. But at the same time, Havner, the state attorney general, had hired him to tell him about Wilkerson's activities and Jones's activities. He was getting information about both of them. Well, Mr. M told Jones that they were going to knock over the store. And so he had the town marshal, Hank Horton, and his son, Albert, and a worker, an employee, a guy named Palmquist. They were all hiding in the store. And along about 2 in the morning, maybe 3 in the morning, here came these 3 figures. Their trip there was a story in itself. He gave them a car, and by this time, Brick, the leader, Brick Boiler, he began to get nervous because it didn't seem that he was told by Wilkerson that there's nothing illegal about committing an illegal act to gain evidence, that's not a prosecutable offense. And he didn't believe that, but he didn't want to admit that he didn't want to do it. So when he wasn't being watched, he opened the petcock on the carburetor so that the gas would drain out. And they were going down the road only about 4 miles from Villisca when the car stopped. And then they had to walk back to a little town called Nottoway and get somebody up at 2 in the morning to get gas to get out of there. They went on in, and they came to the door, and they were kind of fiddling with it, seeing how to get in. And they look up, and here's Marshal Horton standing there with a pistol pointed right at him. Well, one of them had been left at the car at the throat of the alley, and the other 2 were there, and they took off. But Horton, well, he fanned on the trigger. He did not shoot, but he claimed he had tried to shoot, but the gun didn't work. He was a loser either way, because the townspeople ridiculed him for not being. Some didn't think he should shoot, and others thought that, good heavens, we got a marshal who can't even shoot his gun.
Right.
But they got away.
Damned if he did, damned if he didn't.
Yeah, that's right. I think he saw that they were basically high school kids,
right,
and he didn't want to kill any of them and let them run. And he was right. They had no trouble finding them. They had stopped in this town. People identified them quickly, and they were arrested. And they had a trial that summer, and Wilkerson and the 3 were tried. Well, they had a hearing, and the locals basically, the only question that the jury had was, well, how much has Montgomery County spent investigating this murder? And they said, well, millions, thousands of dollars. And they said, well, these are young kids, and Wilkerson's trying hard to get evidence. I don't think we're going to spend any money on it. So they threw it out of court, not because they weren't guilty. They just wanted to do it. Anyway, the slander suit got together, and Wilkerson's case fell apart because they used his dope sheet to call in the witnesses. And time after time, they would ask them directly, did you say this to Wilkerson? No, I never said that. I said this, or I didn't say that at all. And it looks like he felt that I will have a free hand, and they'll not dispute it. If I say they said it, they'll say it. But in reality, under oath, they wouldn't say those things. The most damning of all was all of his star witnesses fell apart. Ed Landers,
absolutely true,
who was going in, his wife was with him, And she had never been asked in the trial or anything because nobody knew what she'd say. But she said, no, there's no one ahead of us at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that invalidated his testimony. Vina Tompkins, she said, yeah, I was there and there were people there. I thought they were talking about money, and I thought it was about a gambling debt. But none of that had come out in the slander suit. It was about a plot to kill. Yeah. And
just falling apart. Every single witness they brought in, they were asked, and nope, nobody was with us. No, it wasn't Albert. No, it wasn't that. That's the way it is, and I think that is a definite mark to make on any kind of case like this, whether it was last week or 100 years ago, that your witness, sometimes that breaks down. I mean, in 12 Angry Men, same thing. Everything gets broke down, and you count on that. But man, they thought they had a lot, and I mean that thing was. And if a little bird told me, you have that dope sheet, don't you? Don't you have Don't you have some documents? Didn't you have like the dope sheet, or got to read it?
Oh yes. The dope sheet's been reprinted. The movie people, the Living with a Mystery, Villisca Living with a Mystery, they published several documents related to the murder, one of which was the dope sheet. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they're still in print. They were selling them, but that's been 20 years ago. Yeah. And I'm sure the sales have pretty well petered out by now. But they made a reprint of it. They also printed the testimony, I don't know what it's called as a legal document. It's a summary of the testimony that the witnesses in the Kelly trial were going to give. It doesn't say they gave it, but that's what they said they were going to give. Mm-hmm. But anyway, not only. Let me give you one example.
Go right ahead.
There was a guy named Dan Stillions, young man. He was high school age when the murder happened. The night of the murder, he was courting Fern Crow, and they lived out north of town just a little ways, a quarter mile. And so he went with her. They spent the evening sitting in the front parlor looking at a postcard album. And then he went home, but he went home. He said by the murder house, and he saw F.F. and Albert hiding behind a tree, and this would have been about 11:30 on the murder night.
Can you imagine F.F. Jones hiding behind a tree, the arrogant bastard? Just saying, no. He was way too good to hide behind a tree.
Well, he told that to Fern Crow. And then he also told it to Florence Petty and Goldie Mitchell. He had several girlfriends, and he told that story, which put him kind of at the center of the movie or the murder. Right. And then they brought him back from Montana. He was proving up on a homestead in Montana, and put him before the grand jury and asked him. And he said, "No, I didn't." I didn't even go by the murder house that night. I went straight down a block to the west, and I went to a restaurant. I met Frankie Robinson in the restaurant. We had a snack, and then we went out, and they had that new pavement over on 3rd Avenue. And so it was, 11:30 or so, and we had a foot race for a block up 3rd Avenue, and then we went home. And they said, "Well, did you tell this other tale to Fern Crow?" "No, I never told her that." And said, "Well, she's in the next room. If we bring her in here, what's she going to say?" I said, "I don't know, but I didn't tell her that." And so she brought him in, or she was brought in, and she said, "Yeah, he told me that he walked by and saw them standing behind the trees." And then they brought in Fern Crow and Florence Petty, and all of them accused him of that, and he denied it, and he hadn't said it. And finally, he admitted that he had said it and he had just made it up. It was a bold-faced lie. And that happened to witness after witness. And so, anyway,
Incredible.
they did not indict him. Instead, they indicted Kelly, which is a different story, and so on. Wilkerson led the fight to convict or to protect Kelly. He had a series of meetings all summer, and he would speak to, some people estimated he spoke to 30,000 people in the 4 months of the summer. Whether or not he did that, I don't know, but he spoke to a lot of people. And he was a stem-winding speaker, and he knew how to relate them. He had Ed Peterson was a Swedish guy, and of course this was 1917. We're at war with Germany now, and he talked about Havner, who was German, in background, and he'd talk about that bull-neck, bandy-legged Dutchman. Well, Dutchman was a code word for German,
Right.
and then he would talk when it was he was talking about Ed Peterson, who later became the sheriff of the county and was a strong Wilkerson supporter. He said he slipped into a Swedish brogue, which I can't do, but something to the effect, well, he's one big Swede, and he would come up and wave. And they would bring out Ross Moore to speak to the crowd, and Ross would start, but he would always break down in tears and have to be led off the stage. And Wilkerson then would give a 2-hour oration. One of them, they said they're going to convict this preacher Kelly.
Yeah.
They got no more chance of convicting him than celluloid dog does of catching an asbestos cat in hell. He would had all those folksy little things he would throw out.
Right.
And then he would slip into almost a whisper, and he wanted to say something to the women in the crowd, and so on. And there are transcripts of all of those, because Havner put a court reporter in the crowd who took a stenographic copy, which he then typed out. No, those I have copies of several of those, and that was to whip up feeling and so on. And then when Kelly, between the time that Kelly's first trial took place and his second trial, Noel, the last of the big witnesses, he committed suicide. He had gotten in financial trouble. Wilkerson had formed what he called the Montgomery County Protective Association. People donated to it to support his investigation and to protect Kelly, to hire attorneys and things like that. Years later, when Oscar Wenstrom, who got to know Wilkerson well, was down in Kansas City, he said he was walking down the street and he said, "Hey, hi, Oscar." And here was Wilkerson. And they talked a bit, and he said, "Well, hey, come over. My apartment's just down the street." He said, "Come over and we'll have a drink." And so he went with him, and he said to him, "Well, this is a pretty nice place." And he said, "Well, you can thank the citizens of Montgomery County for $60,000 of it." So he was implying that
60,000
and
in
that's big
1912, 19 what? What was that? 16?
20s now, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, the trial in 17. Anyway, Noel had gotten himself in trouble with that organization, was pilfering a little money on his own, I think, and he committed suicide, which Wilkerson claimed was caused by he was being prosecuted by Havner. Then, after the trial, Wilkerson decided he'd run for county attorney, which he did in the summer of 18. To do that, he had to get be admitted to the Iowa bar. He was a lawyer in Texas, but he had to get admitted to the Iowa bar. And they formed Havner put together a dossier which he gave to the Iowa bar. And then I think he put a tail on Wilkerson, because Wilkerson was with May Knoll, the bereaved wife of Warren Knoll, who had committed suicide 4 months earlier. And they ostensibly were going to buy property. She had gotten a large insurance settlement, and he was going to advise her about some property she wanted to look at over around Ottumwa, which is 150 miles east of it. That they got in late, and she and her infant daughter, less than a year, Wilkerson was with them, and he signed them into a hotel in 2 rooms, side by side. Let's see, I can't remember the hotel right now, but the state authorities must have been hiding behind the potted plants, because they hadn't gone upstairs until the state, they had, I think, 2 or 3 got there, and they got the night clerk to get them. They got a key, and they got into the room across the hall from the 2 rooms they'd rented, and build up a platform so they could look through the transom and watch it. Well, after a short time, Wilkerson came out in a nightshirt and went into May's room. And then they called, they got 3 guys together, including the night man at the hotel, who had a skeleton key. And they stood outside the door until they could, as they reported, hear the squeaking of bed springs. And then they opened the door, and May was lying in bed covered with at least the bedclothes. It didn't come out what else she had on. Wilkerson was in his nightshirt, and the baby was in a crib off to the side. And they arrested them for adultery, or conspiracy to commit adultery.
Commit adultery. That's wonderful. Conspiracy to commit adultery.
Yeah,
that's a new one for me.
that all went to trial in the summer of 18, before the election, and the jury got locked, and they sent word to the judge saying, "Well, is it possible to convict Wilkerson without convicting the woman?"
Right.
And the judge said, "No, I don't see how you can do that in an adultery case. It takes 2 to tango, I guess." So anyway, the case, he escaped that, but by this time he didn't really want all of the bad news to come out from the thing, and he couldn't run for it without the approval of this Iowa Supreme Court. So he then left Villisca, and that I don't know if he was ever back. I'm not sure.
It's amazing to me, Ed, how, I'm sorry not to cut you off, but it's just amazing to me how many people stayed. We were amazed with the Lizzie Borden case as well, where so many people stayed. She stayed in the same town, just moved up higher on the hill, but stayed. And a lot of people say that, you try to look into character psychology wise, like, why would she stay? Why wouldn't she leave? She traveled. Why did she come back? So you wonder. But F.F. Jones, to me, is, I think he knew he didn't do it. He knew he didn't have anything to do with it. And he just basically, his life and career basically, his life went on, but his career and his politics.
That's right. Basically, all he did he lost the Senate job. He it was hard. He resigned his position in the bank. And I can't remember the exact date. 1918. And I'm sure it was from pressure from his fellow bankers that we're going to go under. Everyone's taking their deposits out because they don't like you. And so he resigned the bank. He didn't sell the hardware store until late 1930s, but that he was semi-retired. Albert did some of it, but Palmquist had been a long-time employee, did a lot of it, and actually bought it that's who he sold it to. And he and his wife did a lot of traveling They had money enough to travel around the United States, and he did that. But he didn't look right or left. He stayed in the Methodist Church. He did not acknowledge it at all. But his life was destroyed by the murder, and he finally wrote a book, Reminiscences, that he issued in about 1940, late 30s, and it talked about his own life, and then it talked about the murder and who how Wilkerson tried to frame him for it, and all of this terrible abuse and things like that. And he was not a particularly attractive guy, frankly. He was self-righteous to the extreme, and arrogant and things like that, but he was not a murderer. In my judgment, it would be very hard to believe that he was behind the murder.
I don't think he did either. And I think if he did, I think he was smart enough and understood the underworkings of business, of town, and everything else. They would have got Joe someplace else if it was just, the rivalry between the two or any of that. I mean,
well, it was completely stupid to do it that way. I mean, if you want to get rid of Joe, if that's your justification, which Wilkerson said it was, then as you said, the idea of killing the whole family to get Joe, you're going to bring down all of the investigative forces that are available. It didn't prove to be much, but you're going to, but if you get knocked over in Omaha, he went into Omaha regularly for conventions of implement dealer conventions, and he could have easily tricked or enticed or something with Joe's reputation. If that was really true, they could have hired a floozy to
little honeypot.
Show a little leg and come on here. I got a room down the alley, and somebody playing, and that's it. But that, it just there's no reasonable way. And the centerpiece of Wilkerson's case was that it was Mansfield who did the murder,
and he didn't do it.
Built everything on that, and Mansfield, he thought that Mansfield, as a common laborer, would not be able to prove his location.
Good thing he could.
And it was. If he hadn't been able to prove it, he very possibly would have ended up on trial for murder.
And I think that's a very important part to pause and say, just go ahead and underline that fact that so many, with reading books and looking at other axe murders and similar cases, so many people stop when they say they found a person and they were convicted of the crime on very little evidence. A lot of time it's mob. It's, they found a transient hiding in the back that got scared of what was going on, and that's it. You're hung, or you're whatever, you're beaten and whatever, because you're so panicked. You can't imagine what a town goes through over something like this. And I can't. Yeah, or lynched right there in the street.
It can easily have been killed in advance, before they had a trial.
And that's why I think it's not so important to stop when you're looking at cases. If you're interested in seeing other cases that are similar to this, as Steve and I have done, and of course Ed Epperly has done for almost 67 years now. When you're looking at that, don't just stop because they say the killer was found. Go back and find the circumstances, unravel that, because that doesn't necessarily mean that person was guilty. You see everything here that was gone through just to push. And this was the only reason that F.F. Jones probably wasn't strung up is because he was a pillar of the community. He had money.
Yeah,
he was a senator.
Yeah,
or they probably would have tar and feathered him or something.
Yeah, they wouldn't treat him like they would of some others. That's right.
But a poor transient would have been.
Yeah, that's essentially all I'm going to say until I hear questions.
There you go. Well, the big thing is this, before we go into the questions, and I have them ready, and I'm going to let Steve open it because Steve has some too. And the big thing about it is to understand that this town was basically cut in half to the point of, if you were a Methodist and a Protestant and your parent, you wouldn't go to that church because the Methodists were for Kelly or
Yeah.
for F.F. Jones, and the
Yeah.
other, and you actually switched churches. You wouldn't let your children play. You wouldn't talk to people who weren't on your side, and it was Kelly and F.F. Jones, and they had them in such a stir that it went on for decades, didn't it, Ed?
Yep. Yep. Well, yeah. Today there are still people. Now the younger generation, no,
Right.
but
Mhm.
older people, you can still start an argument by picking the wrong person to say, I think
Yep.
that Kelly did it, or I think that Jones was behind it, and the people will say, no, that's not possible. My granddad told me that he saw this, and
Mhm.
that proves it to me, and that's still there. Not nearly. The coals have cooled down. They're just.
Mhm.
But you can put your hand over them and they're warm, but
Yep.
they're not hot anymore. But
Mm.
that's just because of the passage of time. All of the people who had very strong beliefs and views have died.
Have passed on. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Everybody in the chat is saying that it's your detail, your recall, the amount of and believe me, we could do another 6 hours of this. And I want you to get the book, and I want you to read about one of my favorite characters. I don't know anything about the man, but he had red hair and he owned a bar, and he seemed to be a scallywag. He was Burt McCall. He was a fast driver. He had a little, what did they call that? Like a taxi, but it was a driving service or something he had. They said
he had a. Now, when I'm asked a question, I can't come up with. Now, he had an auto livery.
That's what it was called. Okay,
like
and
a
drove like the
livery
wind. Yeah, drove like an Uber, kind of, sort of. And you could hire him, and he would take you, and he would drive like the wind. But he did something. And he said, now what he had, and he was showing it around, I don't know how long he had it, but he had a little something about the size of a pack of cigarettes. And it was a piece of Joe Moore's skull. Now, he had this for a while, and then he just dumped it and wound up in in the street curb in the gutter at some point. I guess. Go ahead.
It was the next. He sold it. He did leave town. He sold his pool hall about less than a year after the murder, and went to Missouri Valley where he farmed. I think he did mostly farm the rest of his life, but he sold it to a man named Long, and Long had some friends in too. And this was more than a year later, and he was cleaning up, and he opened a cigar box, and there sat that piece of bone, and he showed it around to the other people in the pool hall, and then took it home, showed it to his wife, and she said, "Get that horrid thing out of here. I don't want it." And so as he was coming back, he was on 3rd Avenue, which is the main street, leads down from the depot to the town. And as he was walking down the street, he just chucked it in the gutter, and, it got washed away or something, dog found it, something. And so on.
It's quite an amazing little detail, and you'll hear a lot of those amazing little details, and how that detail was also important to Wilkerson. Now, why would that be? Get the book and read it and find out. Steve, you're on, baby.
I was almost on. I had to unmute my mic. I'll start here with the questions that you sent me. Edna wants to know, she believes it was a serial killer instead of someone who knew the family. Could it have been a train jumper that used the train to come and go?
Certainly could. That's a viable theory. By viable, I mean it's still being studied. There's information being gathered. You can look at the murders that happened around Villisca. We've talked about them one night, but Colorado Springs, Monmouth, Illinois, Ellsworth, Kansas, Paola, Kansas, and then Villisca. They're very similar. I don't know how different a axe murder would look, frankly, but some of the characteristics of like covering the bodies, things like that. The more extreme things in Villisca were not duplicated in those other murders, like the covering
bacon.
of the bacon is the most. But you have to believe that it's very possible. In fact, what I would like to see is for someone who is young and vigorous to do some really in-depth look at some of these murders that the man from the train
Hmm.
is identified with, to see if there are perhaps police records or court records. Uh, they're largely dismissed in the book because they were working with newspaper records, and to find out, a detailed description of the scene. And there are such in Villisca, and that would give you a thing to compare. You can look at what the doctors testified they found when they went in the house minutes after it was opened and before all of the people streamed through, and compare that to similar studies of some of these other murders. And if you can nail those things down, then it seems to me that the theory that was serial killers very strong.
Is very strong. I believe that as well. And I have a map here. This is the trading center of 4 counties. You have Adams County, Montgomery, Page, and Taylor. And you see
Yep.
Villisca here in the center where the train goes through. I had another question that had to do with the train from Vixen Doe. Do you know the schedule or how often the train ran in Villisca at that time in 1912? I know there was one at 5:20 we talked about with Kelly
Yeah.
possibly being on that. Was there earlier ones in the evening
Yes.
or early morning?
Villisca is the main line of the CB&Q,
Mhm.
which was a major railroad then and is now. Uh, there were over 40 scheduled trains a day that that ran through Villisca. Some of them originated in Villisca because there's a road that leaves Villisca and goes south. I point at it. You can't see what I'm doing, but so
Right.
you go to Villisca and go down to Page County. That's
Right.
a railroad, and so not all of them are going east and west, but you
Mhm.
could come into Villisca from the south or the east and west, not the north, by train. You would have to come into another town and then come in.
Right.
But certainly, I don't have it before me. I'd have to look it up, but I do have the train schedules for Villisca, and they were running passenger trains. I don't have a freight schedule,
Mhm.
but I have a passenger schedule, and they were running. You had a train at 5:19 in the morning. You had a train, two other trains before noon that day, and you
Mhm.
had a train, and they're going. Some are going east, some are going west.
Right.
It seems to me like something like 16 trains a day ran through Villisca, passenger trains, and
Mhm. It
then
is a hub. Yeah.
yeah, and then you have the freight trains, and of course most of the hobos and transients rode the freights. Not there are more ways to conceal yourself on a freight train than there is on a passenger train. Some did ride passenger trains one way or
Mhm. And I would assume that it would be a freight train too. A lot of the transients, I mean, you see the old movies and stuff, and that's really how it was. A lot of times it'd be tramps, hobos, transients, whatever you want to call them. Just reach down and help another one in the train. You sit there and play a harmonica and share your jerky or whatever you
well,
had.
they had a hobo jungle just east of town in Villisca,
There you go.
and actually the weekend of the murder there were 4 black hobos, which
Hmm.
is a dangerous occupation in those days, but
Yes.
they were, and they heard of the murder, and as soon as they did, they caught the next train out. But they followed them. I mean, they uh, traced them and finally found that they had gone to Sioux City
Uh-huh.
and were in Sioux City, and they quickly proved that they. I think they identified the train they had left on probably, and it had left before the murder was discovered. Maybe
Save their butt.
Maybe they heard about it. I can't remember. But
Yeah,
they had,
freight trains did slow down, and it was easier to jump, but the trains pretty much went just as fast as they do today. I found that out when I did the JFK case and when we did the Knights of the Golden Circle during the Lincoln assassination, that it took the same amount of time to get for, them to get to Canada as it would now, pretty much the same. So you could be on that train, hidden in the back, the guy, whoever it was, obviously knew what they were doing, and be in the next, state over before you blink. So it's very possible.
yeah,
How
a lot
close
of
was the
trains.
house? How close was the house
Well,
to the
the
train?
house was not as a lot of people have talked about. The house was right by the railroad, or more often they talk about the killer waiting until the train came through and made noise, and then they could kill him without awakening anyone. The house is, well, it's at least 6 blocks, and I think it's a little closer to 7. It depends on how you define a block in
Right.
some way, but it's a good 5-minute walk from the house to the railroad. You're not just cheek by jowl like you are in Ellsworth, Kansas, or Colorado Springs, but it's when you get off a train in the railroad yards, all of the roads go straight north, and if you get on the one that goes directly to the house, it'll go right by the house. But I would say it's 6.5 blocks from the.
And I found it very interesting that even though everybody keeps poo-pooing the bloodhounds, and I know that they came later and everything else, there was so many people walking around, how they would ever get a scent and hold it, I don't know. But to tell you the truth, they went up. This is the kind of the map, the way they went. And did they not lead them through the back way and across into the Nottoway River and then down the river a little bit, which led to the train tracks? Did it not?
They, well, the train goes over the Nottoway River. It's got a bridge right there. The red house is the murder house. And the green dotted lines, I'm assuming your viewers can see this.
Yes, they can.
Okay. They went north a block, and then they went west. And they went by the Moore house, the F.F. Jones house.
Which is picture in the top.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not seeing, well, I think it's covered by the picture.
Yeah.
It's right in there. And then they went clear to the southwest corner of town, and then out this way. The railroad tracks are going to be running right here, and it crossed those tracks, and the river is running right here.
There you go.
It's very possible that the dogs were following. There's no way. I don't know that much about dogs. I have read some things that bloodhounds are successful in following a trail about 60% of the time, which is pretty high, actually. I mean, 6 out of 10 times.
Yeah, it is.
And I suppose that depends on. I don't think it matters as much about the, people talk about crossing the trail, that if a lot of people crossed it, then it depends on the distinctiveness of the scent that they're following.
And with that kind of murder, I mean, not to get graphic here, guys, but this is our channel and you can handle it. The sweat, the pheromones, the amount of musk this guy must have had on him, not to mention, now I believe we talked about the food, partially eaten food, which could possibly have been left by the people, we don't know, but we often hear there was a bowl of bloody water also. Was that a fact, or is that fiction?
No, that's fact.
Okay.
There's a little disagreement, because some people report that it was dirty water,
Okay.
and other that it was bloody water.
Okay.
It was in the kitchen area, and that's one of the reasons I don't believe there was a dish of food, frankly, because none of the people who report that they saw the bloody water said there was food on the table. I think that
there you go.
They did say that they had milk and cookies before they went to bed. And I think that got exaggerated into a half of a meal. They say the half-eaten meal.
Right.
Most people who believe that, and so that's become part of the folklore of the murder. But I can't find any statement by the doctors on the scene or the marshal that there was half-eaten food on the kitchen table. But they did find in the somewhere, I don't know where, somewhere in the kitchen, a basin, probably a
Okay.
metal basin.
There you go,
And
Jack.
two of them, most of them said it was bloody water, but there were a person or two testified it was dirty water. I wonder if it wasn't a case that the doctors who examined the people
Wash the hands.
washed their hands and got the ones who gave close examination got blood in it, and then later somebody threw that out and somebody else washed, but it wasn't blood. They got it was dirty. Now it may be that the one doctor just looked at it and thought it was, but the blood can get pretty dark, and maybe he saw it as dirt rather than blood. I don't know, but they're in agreement that there was a bowl of water there that was either blood or dirt.
There you go. And that's the important thing about this is we're putting out the facts. And that way, when you guys go back and look, you go, okay, well, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. It was also going to help you discern who you listen to about certain cases. Because again, like we said, it could be lazy. It could be just, they honestly believe it, or whatever. But Dr. Epperly goes back, and I believe that you say that most of the stuff that you base your fact on is the doctors that went in and the police that went in.
Yeah, actually, there were 4 doctors from Villisca that all went in, 2 of them before anyone else in the house had been in the house. 2 of them came in, might have been in before the crowd got in, but they might have been there later. And then the county coroner, is the 5th person, he was there while the people were in the house. And then, of course, Marshal Horton, Hank Horton, went through the house first before anybody went in. So those 6 people have all testified under oath, some of them repeatedly, because, you had 2 grand juries. They were called in for that. You had 2 trials of Kelly. You had several other investigations where they took depositions of people. And so you've got a pretty clear picture of what they saw. Now, they're recalling sometimes 5 years later, and they, just because they're doctors doesn't mean that they aren't as guilty as all of us at our mind plays tricks on us, and we think we saw it, but we didn't. But you do have some confirmation of seeing it.
Well, by looking at this map and looking at, the way you described it, the way it was, in the movie, and I highly recommend the movie yet again, villiscamovie.com, go see it. I mean, rent it or get the DVD. There's lots of extras on the DVD, but my gosh, you can watch this on, Tubi, Pluto, whatever you demand, movies on demand. Go there and just follow through and you'll see. But you're going to get a lot of this, but this is only my opinion. And this was Vixen Doe's question, by the way. And a lot of people had this question. So if you already asked that, it's for everybody. But I think the Bloodhounds did their job that day. That's just my opinion. And I think they followed through, unless somebody was leading them. Let's go to the river because everybody goes to the river. That could be true too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. The movie people were impressed by the Bloodhounds too. I mean, they felt that it looked like the Bloodhounds. And if it was a transient, if it was a serial killer, then the Bloodhounds run is part of the explanation, because you have to get him out of town somehow. Yep. And the chance of him walking out of town and not attracting attention is people walked a lot in those days and long distances, but that would still be, it's pretty
He'd have been picked up.
It's pretty obvious to me that if it were a serial killer and he then got out by train somehow, It
Yep.
could be as simple as walking on, buying a ticket, and riding to Council Bluffs. Although the authorities traced every ticket that was purchased
Mm.
in Villisca, the 24 hours, from
Wow. Okay.
midnight to the next midnight, so that if the killer bought a ticket, that I don't think
Yeah.
he did,
Mm.
because they had a record of one ticket to this town, two tickets to that town, and then they go to that town, and they had a lot of detectives working on the case, most of them private, trying to solve it for their own publicity. But then you can go to that town and say, do you remember who was it? You got a
Mhm.
ticket, somebody came here, and they say, oh well, John Smith, every Monday he comes in because he goes to see his aging parents
Mhm.
on Friday and Saturday, and he comes here Monday morning, and that was his ticket. And you
Mhm.
get that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
In a
He could
little
have
town,
rode on the back of the caboose for all that. You
yeah,
know
a
what I
little,
mean? Just grabbing on and
sure. Well, he could have, but
different spot, hopped off, and continued to walk. I mean, it's possible.
yeah, the Villisca is a little town, and people bought tickets, but it isn't like you're in New York City and New York 20th Century Limited or anything like that. You got a few
Absolutely true.
tickets sold, and they
Yeah.
traced them down. So I don't personally think that he rode out in a
Passenger train.
passenger train. I think
Mhm.
he was a hobo. I mean, he
Mhm.
swung on a train and rode out that way.
That's where
If
I
he-
am.
yeah.
I'm right there with you, Dr. Ed. Steve, do you want to take the next one? Do you still have your list, honey? If you want to take Jack Kilowat's got a question. Do you see it? If not, I can do it for
Yeah,
you, honey.
yeah. Dr. Epperly, why do you think the killer covered the faces of his victims?
Yeah. Well, you're out of my field in a way. I'm not a forensic scientist. I haven't studied it, but uh, it was interesting. And I don't know that I've run across that in other murders that I've looked at. And I've only looked at these four, really. But he covered them, he put a face cloth first. I mean, a piece of clothing that he picked up. And then he covered them with the bedclothes. And that seems to me to be a little different than something that's not so rare, I guess, for a serial killer to cover his victims.
Mhm.
He'll pull the bedclothes over them, but to cover them twice,
Mhm.
that
Significant.
that probably is significant of some kind of an internal feeling. I've heard some suggest that he was remorseful, that he wanted to treat them nicely in death. he wanted to honor them in death, not that it wasn't that he even covered the adults that he
Mhm.
had virtually erased, but he
Mhm.
still put the cloth over their face.
Incredible.
I've heard others saying that any kind of covering of the face is an attempt to deny their humanity. I haven't really done this in a sense. I mean, these are just kind of lumps
Right.
in the bed, and I don't have to feel guilty about that
Mhm.
as quite as much. And I don't know if that's what a serial killer thinks or not, but if it is, yeah, I could conceive of him then covering them with the face cloth as a really,
Yeah.
maybe he
Twice.
wasn't satisfied with that.
And,
Yeah.
and I have a question that's just my question.
Sure.
Do you think that had like maybe the same reason that he covered the mirror, the same thing, he just didn't want to see the faces or catch sight of the
Perhaps.
bodies?
I don't know. Again, here's that division. We talk about the serial killer and we forget about Kelly or someone else, but the only way Kelly, if it were he, the only way he would be involved like this, he would be masturbating,
Mhm.
looking at the girl. That's why he arranged her. That's why he lit her. That's why he closed the house so no light could get out.
Mhm.
All of that. And that would put him very close to that mirror, be off to his right. And he might have found it spooky. I could see him in the process, and all of a sudden he sees movement in that mirror, and he thinks he makes a quick. I'm just play acting now. He makes a quick turn to defend himself, and sitting there breathing hard. He thought he would never be interrupted in this, and now he is, and so he just grabs a skirt, and that's what I make something out of the fact that it's kind of casually covered. The windows, he covered them completely and even pinned them up in the door.
Yeah, I think if it had disturbed him too bad,
Yeah, there you are.
Broke it. He would have just broken it or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
good point, Steve. Yeah,
he just kind of threw it over it so he couldn't be disturbed by it. Now, I don't have any proof. With this, we're in the realm of speculation.
We're just theory and guessing, and
that's fun, but it won't stand up in court.
right. And you got to wonder too, is like we're sitting here, let's just say, we're functioning adults, and we go out in the world, and we come back, and we come home, we do it again, but we're not in that psychotic, neurosis of a serial killer and why he would do something. If the reason it's so important is how many other ones do we have where they were doubly covered? And just because they're not, MOs change a little bit due to environment, weather, availability, time, things like that change. So you take it into consideration, but you don't land on it.
Another element of that, though, that might support the mirror being covered not for this reason I just gave you. Maybe he was following kind of funeral rituals. The idea of covering the corpse or putting a face cloth over the face would seem to be a ritual behavior if that's the case. And the covering of mirrors at a funeral or at a corpse in the house waiting for a funeral, those kinds of things was very common. I mean, lots of people did that. And it could be that it seems strange if you were so, you had deviated so far from norms and expectations to kill all these people, then you think, but we got to cover that mirror.
Suspicions run deep.
We got a whole bunch of corpses. I made
culture, how you were brought up, your suspicions, that's right. What you're afraid of, all it runs deep.
We do strange things, particularly if we're psychotic, and he might have draped the mirror because that should have been done. I don't think he did a very good job of it, and that's one reason why I think if he was being motivated that way, he might have covered it more fully than he did. But again, it's speculation.
Yeah, and it all is at this point, with that. And Ted and Glenn both added to that, and I believe you've answered that, was basically, Glenn was saying, could this be a way of dehumanizing them? Yes, it could.
Yes, that's right.
And a detachment from what he had done. Of course, both things could be true.
That's kind of what I was trying to say when I said that you cover them and then they're no longer human. They're just lumps on the bed, and I'm not guilty for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. It is very possible. And it's also judgment. I think it's very possible for judgment. A lot of the psychos, they want to do their thing. They don't want to be interrupted by any outside forces, whether it be light, somebody peeking in a window, looking at themselves in a mirror, or having even the dead look back at them. They want to experience their fantasy the way they want it. That's the whole thing. It's methodical control. It's possible. Possible. Steve, you got another one, hon? You want to do the next one? Bernice and Glenn.
Yeah, Dr. Epperly, do you think there could have been two killers for so many people being killed in one night?
Yeah. I personally don't, because I don't think that solves the problem. A lot of people talk about that. They did at the time. They talked about that. And the problem they were confronted with was, how does the killer move around quietly and not wake anybody? And how does he kill people in one room and not wake the ones in the other? Incredible. All of those are hard to explain. I admit that. But if you try to do it by the two killer theory, you almost get into a synchronizing your watch.
Mhm.
And at 2 minutes till 12, we're going to do the killing so
Mhm.
that the person downstairs isn't striking before the person upstairs. And if you've got them both together, then you've got 4 feet clomping along, not 2. Things like that.
Yeah.
I I don't think you solve that problem,
Mhm.
which is a bothersome thing to many people, many people.
Mhm.
Uh, I myself lean towards the fact that the children sleep pretty soundly, and you
Mm.
could kill. They probably didn't wake up. The parents may not have awakened either, or not. They might have awakened too late. It's
Mhm.
only 2, 3 steps from the stairway to the bed, and so you've got, I don't know, a second or two, and
Right.
then you start swinging. One of the doctors speculated that the killer shortened up on the axe. It wasn't like he was swinging it this
From the
way,
end.
but and he turned it over and used the butt of the axe and killed everybody with just a single blow. So that you 2 people lying in bed, it's bang bang,
Mhm.
and the axe probably doesn't move more than a foot or two until it hits. Then the parents, they did a lot of swinging,
Mhm.
and it
Look
may
how
be.
close these stairs are. This is what Dr. Epperly is talking about. When you walk up the stairs, he believes that he probably took the oil lamp and set it right there on the floor, which didn't have the cover anymore, so it was a low light, and that their bed was more in the center because you can walk on both sides. But this is how close
Yeah,
Joe and Sarah's bed
this would
was.
be Joe, and that would be Sarah.
Right. Now, this is not their furniture. All that furniture was given away to family. It was a very large family. Why anybody would want it, I don't know. But there's
I'm
Joe.
not. Yeah, I'm not sure that any mirror was covered except downstairs.
Yeah.
They lots of people say that, and they present it that way at the
Hmm.
tours. But I've not heard. Sometimes you'll read the mirrors were covered, but
But it was
many
only
times
one.
it's the mirror that was covered. And
Hmm.
of course, that changes a little bit its impact. It moves
Hmm.
a little more towards a funeral ritual if they did cover multiple
Yes.
mirrors. It moves a little more towards the disturbance explanation if they only cover the one.
Mm.
I've got
Absolutely incredible. Go ahead, Steve.
and again, this is me. I didn't see if this has already been covered or not, but the closet that we have talked about, did it go anywhere? I lived in an old Victorian house once, and you could go in the closet in one bedroom, and there was like a little passage in the back of it
Yes,
that would take you into the closet in
I
another
grew up. I
bedroom.
grew up in a house like that.
Yeah,
Me
and I
too.
We
wondered if there
we,
was
we had a
a closet
closet.
with a dead
There were
end, or
2 rooms in this upstairs place, and you
yeah,
go in the door, and you go the length of the closet, and there's a door going into the other room.
yeah.
So you could go like that. No, it didn't.
Just
they
curious.
there was a little closet that had been kind of jerry built, I guess, out of in that room with the kids.
Hmm.
And only reason I know that, and the fact that that door was open a little, because some of the blood spots went in that closet and hit the wall.
I thought
The
maybe if they were joined
closets,
that way, he could go from one room
no,
to the
it
other
didn't
room.
go through. The closets that everyone talks about are on the east. They're under, you know how a gabled house, not a, yeah, it comes up like this and then
Hmm.
goes up, and that leaves a space out under the rafters.
Under the eaves, their dormer or whatever they call it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And so they had opened that up. They built a door there that you could get in, and it was a 2-layer door. I mean, excuse me, I'm saying that right. It was a 2-layer closet. You went into a conventional closet, and then if you went further in, it was just the stringers running there, and they hadn't floored it.
Mm.
So you've got a kind of an attic beyond the closet.
Mm.
But
Wow.
the killer would have been in the floored part, because if he hadn't have been and stepped off the joist, he'd have gone
It
down
went through
in the kitchen.
yeah.
But and then there was a closet in the downstairs bedroom where the Stillinger girls were, because that was under the stair, where the stair goes up, creates some usable space if you block it off. And they did that with, I think they just built a frame up like this and tacked a cloth across so that you could just pull that up. And that closet was stuffed. It was completely full.
Completely
You got
full.
a picture of that, I think. If the one with the mirror, I'm not sure if that's the one that shows the closet.
I think it does. Let me find that real quick for you. Oh, I've got like 100 and something of these. It's hard to find them all.
I'm glad you're worried about it.
Woo! It's something.
I just have to sit here and let it roll.
Oh, you're the star, baby. I told you, around here, you're a big deal. All right, there's that closet he's talking about with all the stuff, right?
It's back in here. I've got a different picture that shows a little closer, and there's a covering at that one that is a little lower. I think this might have somehow they've opened there. Maybe they've removed that cover, and you're looking into where they've hung the clothes and things. But you can see it's full.
It's just stuffed. Yeah, there was a lot of people in this house. There really was a lot.
Oh
of people in this
yeah,
house.
sure.
And speaking of the house,
visiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a horror that is. I mean, if you can look past all of the, the obvious horror of this crime, 2 little girls, the Stillingers, and I have a picture of their parents. I feel so horrible for them. Dr. Ed told us about this in part 1, where they wanted to stay after. They didn't want to walk home in the dark, of course. So they called ahead. I think Joe called ahead, talked to the older sister, and asked if they could stay, and they did. So just by the flip of a coin, these 2 kids were here. And it absolutely just guts you when you think about, their parents, because I don't know if I have it correctly, but I believe she was, Mrs. Stillinger was trying to call to see why her daughters hadn't come home. And didn't the telephone girl, I forget what they called them, say, well, no, we can't go through there because everybody in that house has been murdered.
Yes.
That actually happened.
Yeah, the kids didn't come home. They were to walk home with a teacher, country school teacher, that morning, the Monday morning. And they didn't come home. And so Mrs., who was, I don't know, nearly 8 months pregnant, I think, she called in, and the Central girls first said that we can't place a call there. And that was it. And so she called later, and the Central girl was distraught, I guess, and said, we can't connect you to the house. They've all been killed there, or they're all murdered there, or something. I don't know her exact words, but that's how the Stillingers found out about it. The mother lost the baby shortly thereafter, not the next day, but it was assumed by everybody that it was caused by the stress and strain of the case. And they also, for years, if a child was born that was somehow deformed, they blamed it on the murder. They thought in those days that if the mother had a trauma during pregnancy, that it would mark the child in some way.
Incredible.
And, yeah. That was
incredible. Absolutely incredible. There's a question here. I know that we've answered, but I think it's important to repeat it for those that doing research, and if you're doing other cases and trying to see, or if you're paranormal investigating and you're trying to get information. The number one thing I hear that is distorted on this case is how many blows each person had and with what. You'll hear that each person was hit 30 times and all that. This is all bunk. Dr. Epperly has told us that this murder, the blunt end of the axe was used. Each child was more than likely hit once and done. And then he went back and repeated with the parents. They were the most bludgeoned. Joe was messed up from the nose down, completely just wiped out. But again, probably with the blunt. And Sarah was the only one done with the sharp end, and her face was cut. Now, I thought it was like this, but you said it was like down to the chin, forehead to chin.
Yeah, that's
with
what
the
I
blade.
thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
with the blade.
the children, I think one of the reasons that there's some disagreement about that and that people talk about it is because, the children are, well, the 5-year-old, and then 12 is not all that old. And so they got tremendous damage done when the best example I can give you is Catherine, the girl. She was struck kind of on the forehead, and the forehead collapsed. I mean, the heads just got mangled, but the forehead collapsed, which, that left her eyes are not really visible because it's all been pushed in, and the face was not really recognizable because the cheekbones and the nose, all of that was kind of folded in under the forehead that got pushed back. And so a lot of people thought that they had been hit repeatedly because their heads were just deformed. I mean, just completely obliterated. But the doctors were pretty clear that the killer did not use the blade of the axe. He used the butt of the axe.
There you go.
And
that is similar to answer. Glenn's got a question that goes with that. I'm just going to throw in real quick that how many in the area? There are several also done, explained in The Man from the Train and multiple other different things where it'll tell you that certain MOs, the killer in certain axe murders only used the blunt end. And it seemed like the mom of those murders would get the most devastation, spent more time.
Yeah, and in Joe's case, the face was gone, and the brain case was gone, with the exception of the back. In fact, one of the doctors speculated that the killer had turned the axe on its side and used it as a kind
like
of
a sledgehammer.
Yeah, like a sledgehammer. It wasn't that way. She was killed with the butt of the axe too. She had a killing blow on top of the head. That's caused some people to speculate she might have sat up
and then got it.
Yeah, the killer whipped over and hit her with it, and it killed Joe first. But that's, again, we're back in the realm of speculation, which is great fun, but I can't say it for sure.
We don't know.
But then the killer came back and for some reason chose to mutilate her face with the blade of the axe.
Right.
And the one that had the accordion and an accordion.
Yeah, that's kind of my own invention.
I can't even imagine. Too frightening.
Because some people, the people going through saw the victims in the bed. And some people testified that her face was normal. And others talked about it being, the doctor particularly said it was, you could open it up, you could pull on the top of the forehead and it would open like this. And that suggests that
he was really mad at his mother.
For some reason he wanted to obliterate both of them.
100%, Glenn. I'm right there with you, Glenn Danson. He's saying the same thing. And again, I think it's often, if we're, again, speculation across the board here, but it's often when, especially a male child is abused, and again, we're assuming what would cause a person to break into this many fragmented pieces of, whatever. It could be anything. It could be chemical imbalance. It could be multiple things together. But it's often that even if the dad was the abuser, just say, they blame the mother more because she should have stopped it. She turned her back and, either out of fear or whatever. And that's the blame is often put there because why didn't you, you stop it? It happens. It happens. It's possible. We don't know. We're speculating. Yeah. Steve, do you want to take the next one, honey? I'm going to jump to like 17. Okay. 17's a good one.
Okay, Glenn Dannison says, did the home or town have electricity or gas lighting?
They had electricity. They had electric lights, but not that night. Well, this is called speculation. A lot of people wondered the at least the street lights were out.
Hmm.
Let's put it that way. I'm not sure whether they had a double circuit so that they could light houses but not the street lights.
What if the
But the
killers had anything to do with that, putting the lights up?
There was some
what's that?
kind of a dispute.
Yeah, I wondered if the killers might have had
No,
something to do
that's
with
what
the
everybody
lights.
your immediate reaction is
Yeah,
that's what it
okay.
is. But
Like
that
cutting
was
phone line or something. Yeah, that's
yeah,
what-
Mhm.
that's right. Sure, that was not the case though, because the Villisca had a municipal power plant. This wasn't coming in from a central power plant. They generated electricity in the town, and that had its own governing board. And they got into a fight with the town council. And if you read the Villisca Review, that fight went on for several months. And it related to the placing of poles, electric poles, on the main street downtown, which is 3rd Avenue. And they had bricked that street in 1911. That's where Vina Tompkins was camping outside of town because her husband was laying brick on that
Exactly.
street. And the I'm not sure without looking at my records, but I believe the council did not want them to put a line of poles down that street on the park side. And the electric light board wanted to do that. And I think it might have related to the cost it took, because if they did it on the park side, they could dig in dirt. And if they did it on the west side of the road, they'd have to go into cement. And so they went ahead and put up the poles. And the town council, or they told the thing, they went in and sawed off one. I don't know if they sawed off more than one. And the power company struck back by turning off the streetlights. So it was a coincidental thing that they turned off the streetlights that night.
Bet you they came back on real quick.
Well, they did. And someone even said that, they got the streetlights right on right away.
Hmm.
I think that was
I
Urban.
bet they did. I
She
bet
has
they
a-
did.
In the movie, there's an interview of this woman who was 11 at the time or so, and she said that they got the streetlights on right away. I'm sure they did.
You guys got to see that movie. After this, it's going to be a blessing to you, because you're going to like, oh wow, okay, that goes there, and they have pictures of all kinds. They even got pictures of the Nottoway River. So Susan Woodcarver put all our questions together. Has a question: who cleaned up the beds, house, etc. after the terrible crime? I know that one lady went in and volunteered to wash the bodies, but who cleans up after that? Towns, right? Family.
Yeah, the way that operated, the county attorney is at that time in Iowa, the county attorney was the lead police authority in the county. Not that he was a policeman, but the police, the county sheriff, would follow the direction of the county attorney. And the county attorney, the funeral was on Wednesday, and before that, on Tuesday or Wednesday, he talked to Orrin Jackson, who was the county sheriff, and said, you get the house clean, get rid of all of the bloody things and clean it, and we'll fumigate it. And so county sheriff contacted Hank Horton, the county or the city marshal, and passed the job on to him. And the city marshal hired a guy, let's see, my name problems are still here.
Okay.
Fess Cooney.
These names.
Sylvester Cooney. And he took a helper, Larson, a younger man. And they went on Thursday, the day after the funeral. But if I were doing a movie, which I'm not, that would be a great scene, and I would do a little artistic license and have them cleaning the house while the funeral was going on. And you cut back and forth between the preacher, what he's saying, and the guy rolling up the mattress. Well, the funeral had taken place, they were buried, but then Fess Cooney went in, and the two of them, they took some of the wire that had been stretched around the house to heat the crowds out after the crowds had already got in. And they rolled the mattresses up. They put all of the bloody clothing, anything that had blood on it, in the mattress, rolled them up, tied it with a wire, and then took it out. And Kettle Overman that's a lot of nicknames in 1912. Kettle Overman was a drayman, and they were going to take it out to the burning dump. Well, Carl Peterson didn't have stomach for any more, and he said, "No, I'm not going. I'm not going upstairs. I'm going out." And so Fess went up alone, and he rolled up the mattresses, did the same thing. But the stairs was so narrow and steep that he couldn't get the mattresses down the stairs.
Yeah.
And all of the residue of the murder, any bone or blood or skin, anything like that, was just rolled up in that. And then, so they took out the frame of that south window and took the window out, and they pushed it out of the window, and it fell down to the thing. And then they loaded it. Well, when they pushed it, the bloody mattress stained the side of the house. And Carl Peterson had recovered enough that he could work again. And so he went and got some whitewash. And it was a white house. And so he painted out the blood with the whitewash. And then they took it out to the burning dump and burned all of that.
Incredible.
Later, they the next day, the marshal and one of the doctors fumigated it. What they did was they took a metal pan and put sulfur in it. Then they sealed the house, shut all the windows, shut the doors, and ignited the sulfur and left. And the sulfur burns and will kill. It'll give you it'll get rid of odors, but it'll also get rid of insects, mice, anything like that.
Demons.
And then after that, within the first month, I don't know precisely when, the kin got together, the brothers and sisters got together, and they divided up all of the furniture. And so the furniture was all dispersed. They gave the piano to John Montgomery, who was the father of Sarah Montgomery.
Oh, wow.
And there was quite a bit of investigation about who was struck first, because if Joe was struck first and killed, then Sarah would have inherited everything because she was alive last. But if she was struck first, then he would have inherited everything, and they couldn't. Well, that's true. That's probably true wherever you are.
Wow. Just think about it like that, though. That's a wild way to think, right?
Yeah. Well, the family didn't. Neither of the families felt that way, and so they agreed, I think, to, we'll all divide the furniture, and they may have had some arguments. Usually do, but at least the furniture all got dispersed within a month of the murder.
Incredible.
And that's one reason why, there's nothing. The only two artifacts that I'm aware of is the axe and the house.
The axe and the house. That's it. Yeah. And there was another question that we have answered, but I'm going to go ahead and reiterate it. Vixen Doe, Renice, and Aunt Edna were all asking about ancient burial rites and things like that. That has to do with, a lot of things that go with the covering of the mirror. You would
Sure.
actually leave a window open for the same reason, for the spirit to escape. And that usually goes with the covering of the mirror. But everything in this house was locked tight. That was locked down tight.
He might have opened a window sometime, but
And closed.
they were closed when they found the house. Two of the windows were not locked,
Okay.
but they were shut, and they were pretty confident that the killer hadn't come in the window or gone out the window, because there was a sewing machine that blocked one. You would have had to move it to get to the window, and the other one had a large spider web in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And you could, if you'd opened the window, there wouldn't have been any spider web. And so, the
early
authority,
CSI.
the persons investigating felt it was clear that he didn't open the windows. And the only thing missing, according to the relatives, at least the only thing that they knew was missing, was the front door key. So
Isn't that creepy?
He let himself out and locked it, and then he took the key. Now, he may have thrown it away somewhere down the block or in the river or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. She's just saying how amazing you are. I told you you're a big deal, Dr. Ed. You're a big deal around here. We love you so much. We love you so much. There's compliments all night long. But that was creepy to me. It was the key, because I can, in my mind's eye, I'm very, when you write and you do things like this, you think about that. I could just see him flicking that thing off the train, like there goes another one, and then on to the next. And that's about all of the thought that somebody this psychotic would give if it was a serial killer.
I don't think I told you this in the earlier episodes. If I did, you can stop me. Maybe
wouldn't think of it. Wouldn't think of it.
Anyway, when I was trying to find Kelly late in the research, I found that he was working in the 1940s as a day minister at the Bowery Mission Church in New York City. And so I contacted the church. I mean, I wrote a letter. And yes, they had record that he had worked there. And do you have any, did he leave anything? Well, those things have been transferred to I think a library somewhere, which I called, and they said yes. That I don't know if they said they had papers from Kelly or not, but they said there was I guess they said there was two files or three or something, and this and that, and then there was a key.
Oh, jeez.
I thought, oh boy.
Oh.
I said, well, I
would have lost it. Yeah.
I'm a long ways away, but could you take that key and
see if it works the door?
Scan it and send me a picture of it. And they said, sure, we'll be happy to do it. And they did. And it came, and it was with quaking hands that I clicked it, wondering if I was going to see a door key for a Victorian house. But I didn't. I saw a little key about this long, which must have been used for a locker or something like that.
Mm-hmm. But oh boy, what it would have been. And that's the thing about being even a hobby kind of sleuth or detective or whatever, that one little piece. I mean, we know so many cases where, like Son of Sam was turned on a traffic ticket, this was turned on there. You never know, and you have to go after all this. But I always thought that was most creepy, is the creepy thing. Well, other than the obvious, is that key, because he's locking up, everything tight, and then, put it in his pocket, probably tossed it along the way. I'm seeing other things in the chat of other things that were found. I got to say, after the book and the movie and studying this, that none of that's true. That's added on stuff. They found pieces of clothing in the bushes. They found pieces of other stuff in the bushes. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Well, I think a lot of those things grew up. They, you're sitting around. One
Hmm.
thing I've been asked, at least 6 people, I
Hmm.
bet closer to 12, have stopped me when I've been in Villisca and talked about it. And they all have the same story. They said that, my grandmother, she could have been in that house that night
Hmm.
because the kids got together
Hmm.
and plotted an idea of let's have we got a party going. Let's get some more. Let's have others come. And
Hmm.
my grandmother wanted to come, but her dad wouldn't let her.
Hmm.
And I've heard that from at least 6, if not a dozen people.
Hmm.
And I don't believe that's true. Now,
Hmm.
I'm not accusing them of lying. I think what happened is like this. You sit around. You've been in that town all your life. It's a Sunday afternoon. You're talking, and they're talking about the murder, which people in Villisca talked about a lot in those
Hmm.
times. 1930 now. It's been 15, 20 years. And somebody said, I could have been in that house. I've been over there. I visited overnight. If someone had asked me, I'd have gone over that night.
Hmm.
Well, the pretty soon it's 20 years later. Now it's 1950s. The person who said that's dead, and you someone said, well, my grandfather, he said that he was planning to go that night, but he couldn't make it. The story gets shaped into a sensible story.
Hmm.
But I don't believe stories like that. And I've never seen anything about at the time any clothes found that
Right.
could have
Right.
been left or
And
anything
that's
like
what I said. This book is the definitive. So if you're interested in finding, if somebody wants to take this and run with it, I'm considering it. I think Donna is a terrific character. I'd love to look into her a little bit more. And trying to match up, I personally want to know um, if Kelly was ever in another town that had an axe murder,
yeah,
even
that would be.
for a
Yeah,
little bit, you
yeah.
know.
I actually, I think there are 3 novels in
Mhm.
this case.
There is.
I think there's a novel that would center on Wilkerson.
Mhm. Mhm.
He's an incredible character.
Mhm.
Uh, there is a novel that would center on Kelly,
Mhm. For sure.
and there's a novel that would center on um, Donna Jones.
Mhm. I think so
She,
too.
yeah, she has. It was an unusual situation, and she had a long and unusual life because of things like that.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I highly recommend again the movie and the book. Read the book. If you're going on an investigation or if you're going to travel, this is something that you're interested in and you're going to go there or for whatever reason, read the book first, get all the facts down, and then you can sleuth yourself with all the garbage out, with all that,
Yeah,
because this is such an interesting case. And the only question I had for you was Mary Peckham, right next door, how close that house was. Did not live alone, did she? Didn't she have a
no,
son? Did he live with?
her son Ernest and her husband.
And they now were the Ernest and the husband ever um well, I don't want to say interrogated, but questioned, and they heard nothing.
No, nobody reported hearing anything. She appeared before the coroner inquest.
Hmm.
So she was there on Tuesday. She talked in her Thursday, and this is partly how the Jones case got built. Was things like this. She was she wasn't well and
Hmm.
very nervous, and so the case just destroyed her. She was a
Hmm.
bundle of nerves, and she went over to a friend. His name was Green, and his wife, and she was going to go to the coroner's inquest after dinner, and this was late morning. I think they would have been on Tuesday, the day after the murder. And she was talking, and she said, "Well, I don't care what you say." Uh, F.F. Jones was involved in this, something to that effect.
Hmm.
And they asked her, well, why would you say that? And she said, well, I know he is. And they said, well, Mr. said to her, well, I wouldn't breathe a word of that, if you don't have any evidence. That's what he was. He didn't say the evidence part, but that's what he was pushing
Right.
for. And so, but his wife heard that, and she talked to the neighbors about it, and that went all over town. That Mary Peckham thinks F.F. Jones is involved, and that carried weight because she lived next door, and that meant, and she, in a sense, discovered the murder. She's the one that detected the house wasn't normal and called for help, and so that made her somehow expert, and that carried weight with people.
Mm-hmm. And that's just it. When somebody like that said something, it did carry. And it's very much like a small town or a small village is very much like the game of telephone. Because, my grandmother said she was going to be invited, but she didn't get to go. And the next thing you know, there's like several people in this. But this was just a lovely family that actually had a little children's play, a little, children's day at the church, and walked home, had cookies and milk, went to bed on a Sunday night, and boom.
It's inexplicable. I mean, completely inexplicable.
It is. And to end this, I hate to do it, but my only last question, and so many people have asked it, Dr. Epperly, what was the main thing that jumped out at you regarding this case and got you so interested in from the get-go? In 1956, it started. What hooked you?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure my memory goes back that far.
That's okay.
But I do remember I was at Iowa State Teachers College, which is now in University of Northern Iowa. And the three of us were working on it. And before we went, we tried to get information about it. And we found a copy of a reprint of the Villisca newspaper that had appeared in one of the Des Moines papers. This is me, and this is one of the other guys, and the third one. This is his sister, and this girl, I can't remember her name. And we were not dates; we were just a gang right there. But anyway, it was a long time ago.
The beginning of a mission, and look at 67 years later.
I had that front page down in the bottom of the library, and it was an older library at that time, and it was late. The library closed at 11, I think, maybe, and I suspect this was 10 or after. It was dark. I had a light like I've got here to work with, and I was reading about the case, and it was talking about the victims and where they were found and all of that kind of thing. And it had a spooky character about it, being where I was. And that made an impression that that's the one memory I have before I got to Villisca, that I was working with the case. And for one thing, it seemed almost bottomless. I could find out something, and then that suggested, well, maybe I ought to go to Paola and see what that murder was like. And I'd find that out. And then I wonder if I said that Kelly was in Galva, Kansas. It's not very far from those places. Mm-hmm. And it'd be kind of interesting to drive by and see what the church looked like in Galva. So there was a continual, it's like a snowball. You kept adding things to it. Yeah.
It's intriguing, and I think to uncover, the whole thing of going back when you walked in 1956, there were still people who were alive that day. Several of your group got to talk to people like Dr. Cooper, who went in first. Other people, the woman who washed the bodies, and so much more valuable information coming from these people who, I assure you, any woman that went in there and spent that time, that kind of compassion to do something like that and wash it, they're not going to lie about it. You're going to get the truth from these people because they're emotionally pierced through. They're going to tell it as they saw it. These are the people that I really respect in this case as far as their information. And Dr. Horton, after walking through with that match through the darkened home,
Yeah,
as the glow of the match illuminates the horror
yes.
around every corner,
Yeah.
it's just so amazing. And when you look back and you do try to match this with other things to see if this could have been a transient serial killer, there could have been more than one crazy person in town at once. There was a lot of broken souls back then, as far as chemical imbalance, medications, not getting the correct treatment, hard work, just so much going on. It's possible that more than one crazy person was in a town at once. So your question, Jack, I'm gonna ask him, and then that's it for tonight, as far as, because I don't want to keep him any later, but he's asking who done it. We don't know.
No,
Do we, Ed?
Right. No, really don't. I fluctuate back and forth. It seems to me the serial killer idea has gained a lot of prominence and a lot of support and a lot of possibilities in the last few years. But if you read carefully Kelly's life, you begin to speculate about him too.
You sure do.
I want to make one last comment.
You do say anything you want, love.
Well, this is kind of an admission, and if any of you, if you've still got any listeners hanging on,
they're here. We're here, babe.
I admit that this is one of the things that drove me after I got rather deeply in it, and it got deeper. It got more powerful as I got deeper in it. I realized that I probably know more about this case than anybody else in the world.
You do,
and I'm not saying that as a braggart. It's a minor vanity. I catch myself walking down the street in a strange place and seeing a stranger and thinking, I know more about the Villisca murder than he does.
He does. When you get your "I'm a big deal" T-shirt, they won't even be coming up and go, "What are you big deal about?" You can tell them, because you are a big deal, Dr. Epperly.
Well,
We absolutely love this.
I admit to that vanity.
That's fine. You earned it, my friend.
As I say, it's a small pond, but my croak is heard all the way across.
There you go. And we certainly listened tonight. We've been listening through this whole thing. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to do one last thing that I've never done for a guest. And I've got almost 500 episodes. I've been doing this for years. I've never done this for guest. And I don't know if it's going to work. But this man right here deserves it. Standing ovation. Please send love to Dr. Epperly. We love you dearly, and I hope this is not the last time we get to talk. Please call me anytime. I'd love to go over this with you and talk a little more about Donna and Kelly. I would definitely do a book on them and keep this going, because it's so unfair when I have a guest that I've been listening to for as many years as I've been listening to Dr. Epperly and interviews. And, sometimes people will record a seminar. It's not, I don't recommend you do that, but I cheated and I'd watch them because I wanted to hear every word. And then, going through the book and then seeing the movie multiple times. And I cannot tell you, they say, a story told is a life lived. Well, darling, that's a hell of a story. I love you, my friend. Please call me anytime.
Okay, well, you do the same.
Thank you so much, and we absolutely love you. Good night, my friend. Steve, you want to say good night to?
Yeah, Dr. Epperly, it's been a pleasure, sir. I hope we can get you back on here soon.
I don't do anything but sit in my basement and talk.
Well, anytime you want to come back and talk.
That's what I do, except I'm not in the basement, but I sit in front of this and talk.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've got 5 channels.
And we'll let you know if we ever come across that key. And I love you, my friend.
You do that. I want to be the first called.
You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Guarantee it. Guarantee it. Good night. Be well, be blessed, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Sorry about that. I had to take my medicine and take Mulder out. And
that's fine. Oh my gosh.
I don't know how helpful I was anyway. But those are some good questions, and he had good answers. I don't think anybody stumped the band.
Nope. Nope. What a wonderful human being.
And the detail that he knows.
Not just because he spent this amount of time. And when you're going to find somebody, and I've come across people that have done that things on, like, Gettysburg or the Civil War or Lincoln's life, or, scholars and historians and things like that have dedicated a large portion of their time researching a certain case or a person. But you're going to be hard pressed to find someone as astute and as the total
Sharp as a
recall.
tack. I hope I have that alertness. I don't have it now, but
I wish I had it now. I mean, please pay homage to this man. Get the book,
buy the
pass
book,
along, buy the book.
movie.
He's going to get more from buying the book.
And give them away.
Right. Please do that. Go in, support him. Go in and put a review on the book. Please do.
Buy an extra copy and give it to your local library. That way you can share it with a lot of people.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea, because I tried to get it from Barnes & Noble, and it's a print on demand through them. So, and I wanted to find out how it best benefit Dr. Epperly. And I think we should probably get him that t-shirt. I'm a big deal. Because he is, to me, he is. Talking to him on the phone, trying to take these little pieces, and he's so humble as far as saying, I don't have a degree in this. I can call Kathleen Ramsland. We can get her back in here. She writes for Psychology Today. She writes blogs for them. She's done The Ripper. She's done so many different things. She works with Mark Nesbitt. They're doing that whole thing on paranormal crime investigation, which is something I'm very interested in. And again, tomorrow night, Steve and I are going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the paranormal side of this. And we had some people in the chat tonight that have actually been there. You may have, gotten a good response and some things from that.
I've been there. I got a keychain. I couldn't stay. It was.
I wouldn't be able to walk in it unless I was going in to clear it. I wouldn't even bother.
It made me sick to my stomach.
Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think? Steve, what do you think at this point? Where are you at listening to all this? Who do you think?
I think I have more questions than I started with now.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just, was it two people? Was it this? Was it that? I still think the train and the railroad was involved somehow.
100%. And I'll tell you why.
I didn't get to ask it, but Edna had another question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Edna.
Were there other murders along that particular train line, that section?
238 of them, all along that train line, because it goes from, I forget the name now. He could tell you off the top of his head, but it went back and forth. And there was 238, and that does not include any case that is completely out of the.
Now,
you know what I mean?
How many of those were axe murders?
All of them. Except one.
200 and something axe, except one.
That's the victims. Those are the victims, not specific, because I couldn't get track of, sometimes there were 6 people in the house, sometimes there's 2, sometimes one, there was 2
whoever
nights.
went in with the axe, they just killed everybody then.
Yeah, everybody. And one night, with the same person with this MO, where they would pin stuff over. Because keep in mind, guys, no, he didn't carry pins with him. I doubt. But these people sewed their own clothes. There's always pins. There's going to be something. But he made makeshift. But this particular person that I'm talking about, as far as this MO, there was 238 that could fit. And that's victims. So I don't know how many separate from train. And most of them, if they brought in the dogs, would follow, stay out of the middle of town, out to the river and to the railroad. Yep. So one of Dr. Epperly's big points that he spoke to me several times about on the phone was he talked to several people there that were either police or something along the lines of people that investigated the case in Villisca. And one of the guys, they talked about the possibility, Kelly doing it, talked possibility of some psycho off the train or whatever. And again, we keep saying train because, as he explained, it's a small town. And at this point at night, people are going to see, even without the lights, you're going to see and notice new people walking around after everybody's gone to bed.
Coincidence to that, and I don't believe in coincidence, but for the lights to go out on the very night these murders happen.
Incredible, right? Yeah. He does a big part of that in the book and explains all the different stuff that went on.
The fight and things going on. And so the one person that was a little girl said they got him back on again real quick.
Real quick. Yeah, that is. It was a whole thing to okay, we'll show them how bad they need the lights. Let them spend Sunday night without it, because they figured Sunday night by the time everybody come back from church, everybody would be walking back from these two. Even people that didn't go into the Presbyterian church went to the Presbyterian church that night for the kids. So they're all walking home, and they wanted them to suffer in the dark. Well, they suffered. How about that? Yeah. But I don't think the lights deterred him, because there were lights on in other towns, and he killed plenty. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and I'll let Steve finish, is when Dr. Epperly and I were talking on the phone, he said, Cisco, who do you think did it after you've done all this research? Because I did, pitiful 8 weeks of research and read, books. And I don't touch books that don't fit the facts. If you start off with lies, I'm not going to look at your book. So I went with, the stuff that he was telling me, and things that he told me to look at. And when I was all done, I said, Dr. Epperly, I understand that the man, he kind of made you think when he said that the coincidence is that two psychopaths would have been on this small town in this night, that somebody as psycho as Kelly. And if you really look into Kelly, boy, what a psycho he was. We did a whole episode on him last week. But I believe it can, because if you think about the character and the people, hardworking farmers, these kids, when you had kids to work.
But to me, it's one of those things like the Zodiac. You read the book, and then you read, so, oh, yeah, it's got to be this guy. It's got to be him. And then they bring in another suspect. Oh, no, wait, it's this guy. It's definitely this guy.
And that's true.
Then there's yet another one. And it's just like it keeps ramping up.
It's so true, because like he said last week, I can tell you about F.F. Jones, you're going to think he was part of it. I can tell you about Kelly, he's going to be part of it. You tell you about this, you're going to think it's part of it. And Steve and I read the book, Man from the Train. I read cover to cover. Steve read most of it. So the point is they went on MO over this Mueller guy who was a German immigrant, and they know where he went, and they think that he might even done that Kella Flecken, whatever, I can't say it. It's a big long German name, but I'll have it for you tomorrow night. But they even think that when it stopped, it started in Germany, and the same MO, and to the point of covering a mirror, but only the mirror. And what Dr. Epperly said was very important, if he had taken a child and posed them, and there was a mirror in that room, that mirror was covered. So that's an important aspect to put there. Train hopping serial killer Paul Miller. I think so, Glenn. I'm there, but here's the caveat. I think Kelly was outside the window watching it, and I think it's a possibility he's the one.
He was the peeper, right?
That he's the peeper. And I think it's possible that he may have gone in after the fact. And Kelly,
he knew they were dead, and he could do whatever he wanted to do. That's just
possible.
Creepy as hell. But
it is creepy as hell. Yeah. But Dr. Epperly said it's absolutely possible. You say this. Glenn's got it. Thank you. How do you spell it? Hinterkaifeck. Now, if you want to see, boy, that's a crazy one. That one almost reminds me of like the that one where everybody got their tongues ripped out and stuff in the tent, and they don't know what. We'll have to do that one night. You know which one I mean.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I
can't even. We need Dr. Epperly. He probably knows that too.
Right on the tip of my tongue.
Somebody, Glenn's he's gonna pop it up here in a minute. But guys, I can't thank you guys enough. Everybody, all my gatekeepers, all my mods. Some popped out for this because they didn't want to deal with it, and I don't blame them. When we do this, or we did McDonald case where there's children involved, or Amityville where there's children involved, we try to handle it with the utmost respect. He's look, we have it broke down. Glenn's got it broke. Wait a minute, let me get it up here. Hinterkaifeck. Okay. It's like those Germans have a different word for everything. So anyhow, that was a joke. It's a bad one, but it's a joke. But that's the thing. This goes so deep for us. And like, why would we even do it? Well, we're doing it to get the facts out there, because I think somebody who spent 70 years studying this, holding documents, he's got court documents and everything else. He's got a copy of the dope files, the original, okay, from the courthouse where it had all of the witness statements in it and everything original. So, it's hard to find another that would have such an amazing amount of information. So we absolutely had to do this. And when we're done tomorrow night, pardon the pun, but I'm putting it to bed, because I think we've done, at this point, I'm almost convinced. The Davloff case. Thank you, Lindsay,
Yeah,
got it.
outlaw.
I couldn't think of it. Davloff. Yeah.
Couldn't
So
couldn't think of it either.
that's what I think happened. I think at the very least, if Kelly was there, he probably looked in the window and was peeping, because not all the windows were covered completely. You could find a crack, or whatever.
I wonder
But
if
I
he
think it's
watched the
possible.
murders, or he's
Yeah.
just peeking in and saw that they were already dead. It could have
I'll
gone
go
either way.
I'll go one higher with you, Steve. This is a traveling preacher who's obviously a nutbag. I just don't think he had it together enough to hold it as methodical as this. This was a machine, a methodical, non-feeling machine that had he had something that he was going to do, and you just do it.
Yeah.
I don't think Kelly had that in him. Even usually when people are pushed and they go into these little trance rages.
Oh, I was meaning when he was peeping, did he peep the murders or did he peep the aftermath? And then
I think it's possible of both, but I think he knows. I think he recognized this dude. I think they've crossed more than one train path. He's going in and out of the same towns that this
he was a
guy's
traveling
going.
preacher, right?
And
So
I think he knew that there was going to be a party that night, because he stood in the back of that church and spoke to no one. And it was like he was just twitching. And some people would think that it was like he's going to go do the murder, right? I just don't think he had it together enough to do it. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. So there you go. Steve, tomorrow night, what do you got going on there, buddy?
Just released the Legends of Griffith Park. There's some creepy stuff. If you want to hear all about Griffith Park in Los Angeles,
Nice.
Go check that out. It's doing good. And check out my #1 video, Dangers of the Appalachian Trail. It's almost to 300,000 views. I think it just took off.
Wow. Wow. Get over there and give him a like.
I'll be back here tomorrow night. Cisco and I've got some surprises coming up that we'll talk to you about later that you're going to love. And I've got my hand in a lot of things here. And just want to say good night to Midnight Society. She's going to bed.
Midnight.
Love you, dear.
Good night to everybody here. Thank you guys so much. The mods did extra work. Thank you, Susan Woodcarver.
This has been just there's so much information here. I'm going to have to go back and watch these over and over.
It's
just
an absolute
try to process everything. I want to read the book and watch the movie and then go back and watch these again.
Absolutely. And this is, what I intended to have is something visual with some pictures. I couldn't get them all. Look at these pictures. Look at that. I got to have one of those. And I want to talk to you, Susan, about
look at the eyes.
A walking stick. I want to get a walking stick.
She's doing me a walking stick too.
For old James Bond in there.
And
but I don't want James Bond on it.
This was the spirit that was already in the wood. It told her how to carve it. So it told her
absolutely
what it
beautiful.
Like.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thanks,
we love artists.
Thank you so much. I show this off every chance I get.
Yep. We love creativity here, because creativity keeps you in the light, and the dark can't create. So it helps you stay out of the dark. And this has been absolutely amazing. What an opportunity we could do to bring this to you. It was on my bucket list as far as these things, because again, it's not because I like to hear about kids getting killed. Absolutely not. I'm a mama, and I've put broken kids back together. So no, we don't play with things that people are hurt. I'm a healer.
Thanks, Bixton Dove.
But what I want to also do, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow night, is heal for this family the lies that have been told. To watch movies where they have this little girl running around from this killer is an abomination. To sell tickets, to pretend that you've got little girls' prints on the wall for evidence. For 111 years ago, after the wallpaper and everything has been changed. Come on, guys, think about this. So watch who you listen to, discern who you get your information from, and you're going to have a better product. Because would you buy rotten flour to make your mama a cake? I mean, why are we accepting lies for click? For clickbait, though, these were real people. My heart goes out to Sarah, and everybody involved in this, but mostly tonight to my good friend Steve Stockton, everybody out there listening, this wonderful, wonderful live chat. Oh gosh. And all of the, the welcoming to everybody new coming in here. If you are new coming in, please consider just hitting the subscribe button. We're at 1760. Give it a like. maybe do a comment on something to Dr. Epperly or something in the thing, because I'm going
Please
to send
do.
it all
People
to
that
him.
came over from my premiere,
Thank you so much for
And,
coming in. And
Like,
if you
share,
like this
subscribe.
show, please watch the other two. There's a part 1 and a part 2, and this one, and then tomorrow night we're gonna finish it with the paranormal
I'm
stuff.
showing
And
81 watching, 42 likes. Come on, we can do better than that.
we can do better than that. Hit that like button for me. Listen, we're going to bring you more of these. I really wanted to get all this down because God bless Dr. Epperly for everything he's done and put into this. And every time I've spoken to him, he's been the most
aspire
honorable.
to be as honorable and intelligent and sharp as he is.
Please let this be an inspiration to you. If you're thinking about doing something or writing a book or looking into it, for whatever reason, under true crime, whatever, unsolved mystery, do it. Do it and put it out there the best you can for those who come along that are like us, that we just want the facts so we can really figure what happened. Because again, I'll say it, I think 2 crazy people could be in town at once. I think 2 psychos could, because
maybe
people
they were
got
traveling
very
together.
broken.
Who knows?
Could be, he could have known all along. Who knows? But again, I don't think he was too together for that. But it's definitely a horror.
Says, I'm new, obsessed with this case for over a decade. Thank you for being so sensitive to it. It means a lot.
Oh, wow. Well, wonderful. Thank you. And welcome. And that's just the thing. It's now you can go forth and go, oh, wait a minute. This guy's telling me that, the head's on pikes, or this happened, or the girl was, please,
No.
It's important to understand the truth, just like we did with Lizzie. And look what we uncovered with Lizzie. Look at what we uncovered with Amityville.
We did with Lincoln. That was just,
yes. Yeah.
I love these deep dives that we do on stuff.
Yep, that's it right there. And we do them every once in a while, but we like to do them right. And I think we got this one right, Steve. And thanks to Dr. Epperly, his family, his daughter, and his wonderful wife.
Better expert. There's nobody with any more knowledge on it. So
that's it. And there it is right there. Villiscabook.com. There he is with the axe. Dr. Epperly did have the axe for about 20 years, and people would say, why would you want to do that? And his simple answer is because if I had it, it couldn't get lost or sold on eBay or anything else. It needs to be in the museum.
Exactly.
And that's where it is now. And it's thanks to that man. And we appreciate him so much. Go and give him some accolades. And thank you for being here tonight. See you here tomorrow night at 8 p.m. with Steve and I. And we'll have some fun. We're going to let our hair down and have a good time. And thank you guys again for being so kind. Thank you to Susan. Thank you to all the people who asked these wonderful questions. And you guys are real thinkers out there. Now you got something to really think about. No nightmares tonight, though. Okay? Just keep that closet door shut and your feet under the covers and stay in the light. We'll keep the lights on for you. Good night, everybody.